gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials in H.R. 7567.
Without objection. Pursuant to House Resolution 1224 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 7567. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Simpson, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 7567, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to provide for the reform and continuation of agriculture and other programs of the Department of Agriculture through fiscal year 2031 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read for the first time. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Agriculture or their respective designees. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, and the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Craig, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I rise today in strong support of the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. It is more evident than ever that rural America needs a new farm bill now, not next year or next Congress. Producers are operating under the 3rd consecutive Farm Bill extension, and the simple truth is the policies of 2018 are no match for the challenges of 2026. It is time to get this critical legislative done. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, because it's important. This bill was not written in Congress. It was written out in the fields and pastures of our great nation while the Agriculture Committee held over 150 listening sessions. We went to farmers and ranchers and rural communities, and we asked them what they needed from Congress. Every provision in this bill is directly informed by what we learned in these listening sessions. Today, you will hear some opposing comments made that this is a partisan bill, and even more on what's not in the bill. And I'd like to remind everyone of the facts. This bill is filled with good policy that is also overwhelmingly bipartisan. Upon introduction, the Farm, Food, and National Security Act included or drew upon 150 bipartisan marker bills. During the committee's 22-hour markup, over 100 amendments were offered and debated, with 46 adopted, split evenly between Republicans and Democrats. It passed the committee with strong bipartisan support. It also enjoys the endorsement of over 500 agriculture stakeholder groups. I'm asking Congress to join the hardworking men and women who feed, fuel, and clothe our country in supporting this farm bill. Now is not the time to turn our backs on rural America, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at kitchen tables across this country, millions of Americans, seniors, working parents, and farmers are wondering how they're going to pay the bills or not lose money this planting season. From tariffs that have cost our farmers markets to a war that has increased the cost of fertilizer and diesel, farmers are struggling to hold on to that 3rd or 4th generation farm. This so-called skinny farm bill in front of us today does nothing to stop these losses or to help offset the $54 billion in losses farmers have had to absorb. Worse yet, it doesn't fix any of the underlying policy choices by Republicans and this administration that caused the problems in the first place. It turns a blind eye to the farmers calling for emergency economic assistance so they can afford to keep planting. It locks in the $187 billion cut to food assistance that Republicans made in the big, ugly bill, putting more pressure on struggling Americans at a time when the cost of groceries and health care continues to grow. That's what the Farm Bill doesn't do. It doesn't lower cost. It doesn't help save one family from farm bankruptcy, which is up nearly 50% since this administration took office. So what does this so-called bill attempt to do? Protect the world's largest pesticide companies from lawsuits, cut farm conservation programs by $1 billion, and overturn the will of voters in states nationwide that set specific animal welfare and food standards for themselves. Putting the harmful policies aside, the political calculus on this should be easy. Do we want to lower costs for farmers, working people, or do we want to protect pesticide companies that lock in cuts to food assistance at a time when grocery prices are spiking? Do we want to pass a farm bill that delivers for farmers on the verge of bankruptcy and families going hungry, or do we want to sit on our hands and make excuses? I urge my colleagues to reject this version of the Farm Bill and force Republicans back to the table to negotiate a true bipartisan bill that prioritizes the cost of living crisis in this country. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to note that most of what the gentlelady, a good friend of mine, says it is not in this bill. It's not in our jurisdiction. It's not a part of the Farm Bill because it doesn't fit. I yield to the gentleman from Oklahoma, the chairman of the Conservation Research and Biotechnology Subcommittee and Chair Emeritus of the Committee on Agriculture, Mr. Lucas, for 1.5 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand here today to offer my enthusiastic support for the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. As the former chairman of this committee, I have been down this road before. And while passing a comprehensive farm bill is never easy, the rewards can be seen in tangible ways in every facet of our communities. They can be seen not just on the farms, but in the grocery stores, the universities, the fire stations, the community facilities, and rural hospitals across this great nation. To my colleagues who will cast their vote tomorrow, whether you represent a top agricultural district, small town, a booming metropolis, the policies in this bill will affect you. This bill will ensure that American farmers can continue to raise the food and fiber that ultimately finds its way into your home, and will ensure that the next generation can continue that legacy. I urge my colleagues, vote yes with me on final passage, and I want to thank Chairman Thompson for bringing forth this bill today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to my distinguished colleague, Johanna Hayes, from the state of Connecticut.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, today we're considering a farm bill that fails to meet the needs of families and farmers across the country. We heard several times in the opening it referenced that this farm bill meets the needs of rural America. But a farm bill should meet the needs of all Americans. And I only wish that we were debating this at an hour where the American public could pay attention and listen. Last year, the House of Representatives considered H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill, which cut the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, by $187 billion to give tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans in our country. Republicans have gutted the most effective anti-hunger program in the United States, which will have unforeseen consequences for generations. And we're already seeing the impact. Since H.R. 1 was enacted, more than 3 million Americans have been kicked off SNAP, with losses reported in every single state. In Connecticut, over 33,000 people have already lost their benefits, and we expect that number to rise. Families are having to choose between keeping a roof over their heads and paying for health care, as food becomes yet another impossible trade-off, not because their needs have changed, but because this Congress has changed the rules. This farm bill is unacceptable in its current form and does not meet the moment. It does not repair the damage, it does not restore the benefits, and it does not respond to the warnings from states and counties that the federal government is shifting massive administrative costs onto them, forcing local governments to consider raising taxes, tightening eligibility, or scaling back services just to keep these programs afloat. This Farm Bill includes a blanket liability shield for large pesticide corporations. It rolls back critical environmental conservation programs. It offers no plans to address the tariffs and trade instability that are already squeezing producers around the country. And once again, this Farm Bill does nothing to address the $187 billion in SNAP cuts already enacted. In fact, it cements those cuts. At a time when grocery prices are rising and tariffs are increasing costs for families and farmers, we should be restoring SNAP and expanding access, not cutting it. This is not a farm bill that strengthens rural America and feeds the millions of food insecure Americans already at risk. We need a farm bill that supports farmers and families, rural and urban communities. I urge a no vote on this version of the bill so that we can get back to the negotiating table and produce something that is beneficial for our entire country. And with that, I yield back.
I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield to the gentleman from Minnesota, Chairman of the Nutrition and Foreign Agriculture Subcommittee, Mr. Fenstead, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Thompson, for yielding. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 7567, the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. As a fourth-generation farmer raising that fifth generation, I know firsthand that farm country has faced compounding challenges over the past several years. I am committed to addressing these issues by passing a strong, bipartisan farm bill that is written by farmers and for farmers, by rural communities and for rural communities. The ag title of the Working Families Tax Cut made the most significant investment in farm safety net spending since the 2002 Farm Bill. The 2026 Farm Bill builds upon those successes, and it reflects the bipartisan priorities of farmers in southern Minnesota and all across this country, delivering the strong farm policy that farmers, producers, and rural communities need and deserve. Every American is affected by this Farm Bill, and this legislation responsibly addresses their needs across all 12 titles. I encourage my colleagues to support this important piece of legislation. I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Lady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to my distinguished colleague, Mr. Jim McGovern from the great state of Massachusetts.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is now nearly 11 o'clock at night. This is nuts. What the hell is wrong with you people? You guys are bringing this farm bill to the floor 3 years late in the middle of the night. It's prime time in Guam, for God's sake. Republicans spent the whole day fighting with each other. You know what most Americans spent doing today? Working, going to school, taking care of their kids, living their lives, wondering, praying if this institution might give a damn about their hopes and dreams, their concerns and fears. And what Republicans have shown time and time again is that they don't care. If they did, they would not be bringing this farm bill to the floor, because this bill makes hunger worse. It means more kids go to bed without food. More seniors end up in the ER after taking pills on an empty stomach. More parents put groceries back on the shelf. Hunger is a political condition. It's the result of decisions made in this chamber. Republicans decided in their big ugly bill to make hunger worse. And with this farm bill, they are deciding to keep it worse by locking in massive cuts to food assistance. 48 million people in this country cannot afford food. And as a congressman and as an American, I'm ashamed of that. And I'm ashamed that in a nation as rich and powerful as ours, the people in charge of this town don't seem to give a damn. SNAP is food for seniors, it's food for families, food for veterans and Americans with disabilities. That's the majority of who is on SNAP. And when it comes to the rest, most have a job. They work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and they still can't keep food in the fridge. People don't want to be on SNAP. We're talking about $6 a day, for God's sake. And they need help because we have a broken economic system. They need help because the average price of a pound of ground beef is now higher than the hourly federal minimum wage. They need help because our tax system rewards wealth instead of workers. They need help because grocery prices are too damn high, and Trump's war and his tariffs are making them worse. And instead of helping everyday people, Republicans take away their food and use it to give billionaires another tax break. It is outrageous, it is immoral, and it is wrong. This farm bill should address hunger. It does not. It should strengthen our food system from the farm field to the kitchen table. It fails that test miserably. And by the way, Republicans are running this place in a way that is an embarrassment, a disgrace to the institution and the people we represent. You know, it's hard to keep track of all the shady side deals this speaker is making and breaking on the floor today. Quite frankly, I wouldn't trust this Republican leadership to tell me the correct time. But based on what I've heard, we will be coming back to Rules Committee on this bill after the district work period. And I want to put you all on notice. I intend to offer, among other amendments, Representative Luna's proposal to protect Proposition 12, which was unfortunately left out of the rule that we're debating today. The American people are watching. They are sick and tired of what this Republican majority is doing. How dare you bring a bill to the floor that makes hunger worse in this country? How dare you bring a bill to the floor that doesn't help regular farmers? How dare you bring a bill to the floor that is filled with all these giveaways to special
Gentlemen, will
interests?
suspend.
Vote no.
Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. Gentlelady from Minnesota.
I'd like to reserve the balance of my
Gentlelady
time.
from Minnesota reserved. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, facts matter. There was no reduction in the amount of the monetary value of SNAP benefits. And in fact, there's some really good enhancements to the SNAP program within this bill. I'm pleased right now to yield to the gentleman from Wisconsin, the Vice Chair of the Livestock, Dairy, and Poultry Subcommittee, Mr. Van Orden, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my Democrat colleagues that I was raised in abject rural poverty by a single mother on food stamps. When you had a stamp that you stuck on a card, I had subsidized government lunches and government cheese. And we do have to know that there's a tremendous amount of fraud that takes place in SNAP, and we want to make sure that every single dollar that is allocated to go to a hungry child or a veteran or one of our senior citizens goes to them. And I'd like to say this to my Republican colleagues. It's a quote. It will not be doubted that with reference either to individual or national welfare, agriculture is of primary importance. In proportion as nations advance in population and other circumstances of maturity, this truth becomes more apparent and renders the cultivation of the soil more and more an object of public patronage. That was the original MAG president, Make America Great, because that was George Washington, and that quote comes from 1796. So when my Republican colleagues say that we don't have enough money to spend to feed our people and grow our lands, they're simply wrong. This is a very, very good bill. And there's things for every single American in the one industry that should touch every American at least 2 times a day. So I strongly support this bill. I encourage my colleagues to do so. And with that, I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserved. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my distinguished colleague Shelley Pingree from the great state of Maine.
Gentlelady from Maine is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the ranking member for yielding me the time. I am sorry to say that this is a terrible farm bill. As a result of this bill, more people will go hungry. More farmers will lose assistance to the conservation programs that are already oversubscribed, and more farmers who are struggling to make ends meet will find it more and more difficult to hang on to their farm. I have a lot of concerns about this bill, but I'd like to use the limited time I have to show some strong support of Representative Luna's Pesticide Amendment. I am proud to say that her amendment, which was made in order, mirrors the language of the bipartisan amendment I sponsored with Representative Massey, and I want to thank Representative Luna for also working on this important issue. Our amendment to strike the pesticide liability shield sections from the Farm Bill has drawn broad bipartisan support, both within this chamber and across America. The harmful language that the Republicans on the House Agriculture Committee included in the Farm Bill is a handout to big agriculture, to big chemical, and it preempts states' rights to regulate pesticides usage or labeling, provides a liability shield for pesticide manufacturers. Put simply, this language puts chemical company profits over the health of Americans. More than 200,000 Roundup-related health claims have been made against Bayer. Behind the numbers are real people, husbands, wives, farmers, even pets, with heartbreaking stories. People suffering from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other devastating cancers, racking up outrageous medical bills. And what's worse, chemical manufacturers have spent time and money to develop additional uses for these same chemicals, beyond killing weeds. We use the glyphosate now used to kill weeds to dry crops before harvest, and it means it makes its way into more and more of our food system. That means the bread we're eating, the hummus, the pasta, is more likely to contain this toxic and dangerous chemical. So more and more people are ingesting it without even realizing it. If this language is not removed, we will have handed companies like Bayer exactly what they have spent millions of dollars and lobbying power on: legal immunity. Earlier this year, I successfully sought to strip this similar language from the FY 2026 Appropriations Interior Funding Bill. Unfortunately, the work we did in that committee did not deter Bayer, who, armed with 53 lobbyists and millions of dollars, immediately got to work to get their get-out-of-jail-free card elsewhere, on this farm bill and at the Supreme Court. Democrats and Republicans and citizens across this country agree: keep this language out of the farm bill. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady from Minnesota Reserve. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm so proud of the Farm Food and National Security Act. It doesn't cut conservation. We had 24% to the baseline. Significant amount of money for conservation, more than we've ever had. And quite frankly, this bill protects health, food affordability, and our nation's sovereignty. And unfortunately, Ms. Luna's amendment that was made reference to will do harm to all three of those. I yield to the gentleman from Tennessee, the Vice Chair of the Commodity Markets, Digital Assets, and Rural Development Subcommittee, Mr. Rose, for 1.5 minutes.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As an eighth-generation Tennessee farmer, I rise in strong support of the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. With input costs at record highs and commodity prices at painful lows, Congress must provide the legislative certainty of a long overdue farm bill. This bill keeps America fed, secure, and strong by standing with the men and women who feed and fuel this country. With support from over 500 stakeholder organizations, this bill builds upon the major victories secured in H.R. 1 by strengthening the farm safety net, conservation programs, and regulatory certainty, enhancing rural hospitals, businesses, water, and broadband, and improving agricultural research, trade programs, and access to capital. Additionally, it combats fraud, safeguards SNAP integrity, and remains budget neutral, all while lowering costs for families. I urge my colleagues to stand with America's farmers and rural communities and vote yes on the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. Thank you.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania Reserve. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my distinguished colleague Jill Takuda from the great state of Hawaii.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier today, we sat in the Armed Services Committee and heard a $1.5 trillion defense budget request. And that's not including the $1 billion a day going to the Iran war. Just imagine what even a fraction of that could do if we invested that in our farmers and in feeding American families. Because right now, every part of American agriculture is under strain, and too many families are going hungry. This is not a moment for a skinny farm bill. It's a moment for a serious bipartisan one. And yet, once again, specialty crop producers, the backbone of agriculture in states like Hawaii, are being shortchanged. Again, they got 7% of the USDA Farmer Bridge Assistance funding, even though we have specialty crop growers in every single state, in every territory, and in 95% of all counties with farms. Democrats fought to fix that. We pushed for an additional $10 billion in support so these farmers could survive and compete. We were blocked. At the same time, this administration ripped away $660 million that helped get fresh local food into our schools, literally taking food out of the mouths of hungry kids and income out of the hands of farmers who grew it. We fought to cancel those cuts, but we were blocked. And let's be clear about the broader context. Tariffs, taxes on our own farmers have cost them billions and made food more expensive for everyone. That's not support, that's harm. So yes, this bill does harm for what it does and what it does not do. It opens the door to privatizing SNAP administration, making it harder for families to access basic nutrition. Conservation programs are lifelines when farmers are facing more severe natural disasters. This bill strips over $1 billion from conservation programs and guts in-kind assistance for RCPP partnerships, the very projects that help farmers invest in their land and build long-term resilience. And it shields the most powerful corporations while leaving everyday Americans with fewer protections. It's an outright poison pill that denies Americans their day in court. That's not a compromise. That's a step backwards. A farm bill that ignores these realities doesn't just fall short. It deepens the crisis. It tells farmers we're not listening. It tells families they're on their own. We can and must do better. I urge my colleagues, reject this bill, come back to this table, come back at a decent hour, not in the dark of night where we're trying to push through this bill and this amendment, and do the hard bipartisan work to deliver a farm bill that actually meets this moment. Vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves.
Reserves.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Well, Mr. Chair, just a reminder, Farm Bill 1.0, which was signed into law last July, is the single largest investment in our farm families in a generation. There were $66 billion in beneficial in so many ways. And quite frankly, specialty crop growers love this farm bill we're working on right now. And this farm bill does restore the farm to school and the farm to food bank provisions. Yield to the gentleman from Indiana, a member of the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Mesmer, for 1.5 minutes.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I stand today in strong support of the bipartisan Farm, Food, and National Security Act. This bill expands access to nearly 2,000 new demand streams for corn, soy, and farm waste through the BioPreferred program. The 2026 Farm Bill also marks an end to consumer transparency issues and preserves value-added labeling for byproducts that use American-grown farm products. In other words, this program serves as a demand driver for farmers in Indiana and across the country. Nationally, the bio-based products industry contributes $489 billion to the U.S. economy and drives nearly 40% of the demand for U.S.-grown ag products. The 2026 Farm Bill reaches farmers in a moment of great need and addresses concerns surrounding market access, input cost, farm succession, and economic viability in rural America. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting American farmers by voting in favor of this American Farm Bill, and I yield back.
And I reserve.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserve. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just remind my Republican colleagues that we didn't do a Farm Bill 1.0. What we did was a very partisan budget reconciliation process, and that farm bills are intended to be 12 title 5-year bills, and that reconciliation does not qualify as that. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my distinguished colleague, Ms. Chantel Brown from the great state of Ohio.
Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Ranking Member Craig. The Farm Bill is one of the most important pieces of legislation that Congress works on. It touches every corner of this country every day. So let me be direct about what this bill does and does not do. It does not address the crisis actually happening in farm country right now. Farm bankruptcies are up 50% nationally and nearly 75% in the Midwest. Input costs keep rising, driven by reckless tariffs and the reckless war in Iran. Farmers are being squeezed from every direction, and this bill offers them next to nothing. No farm aid, no solution to rein in fertilizer or diesel prices, no protections against USDA reorganizations or funding freezes, no attempt to end the tariffs destroying export markets or restore the trade relationship farmers depend on, and false promises again and again on year-round E15. Where is the relief? Where is the urgency? There is a 5-alarm fire in farm country, and Republicans are pulling out a garden hose. Working families aren't doing any better. Gas, goods, and groceries costs are rising, and this bill does nothing to bring them down. Instead, this farm bill ratifies the largest cuts to food assistance in American history. Republicans used the big ugly law to slash $187 billion from SNAP and handed that money straight to the wealthiest Americans. In doing so, they torched the bipartisan coalition that has kept the Farm Bill together for generations. And now they want Democrats to come in and lock in those very same cuts with a bipartisan farm bill while they continue to threaten the SNAP program with more partisan cuts. Give me a break. Let me tell you what those SNAP cuts look like on the ground. In my district, 11,000 people have lost food assistance, and that's before the next round of cuts kick in. Nationally, 4 million Americans have already been kicked off SNAP entirely. 4 million people gone, and this farm bill would cement those cuts and that cruelty into law. Republican and Democratic governors alike are warning they cannot pick up the new cost share coming down the pike. That means more cuts, more hunger, more harm. We need a real farm bill, one negotiated in good faith, one that can actually pass the Senate, one that confronts the real factors driving crisis in farm country and the affordability crisis at the kitchen table. This partisan bill is not it. I urge my colleagues to oppose it. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves with 11 and a half minutes left. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from Kansas, Chairman of the Livestock, Dairy, and Poultry Subcommittee, Mr. Mann, for 1.5 minutes.
Gentleman from Kansas is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026, and I urge my colleagues to pass this critical legislation when it comes to the floor. The last full farm bill was passed in 2018. Since then, input costs have risen, borrowing has been more expensive, and markets have grown more volatile. Our policies must reflect that reality. Last year, we took an important step forward by strengthening the farm safety net and delivering meaningful support for producers through the Working Families Tax Cuts. But that was never the finish line. That was the foundation. This bill builds on that foundation. It delivers a modern, fiscally responsible 5-year farm bill that meets the needs of today's producers and prepares America's agriculture for the future. This bill is grounded in fiscal responsibility. It provides certainty without growing government for the sake of growing government. It cuts through unnecessary red tape and focuses on what actually works for producers on the ground. Mr. Speaker, farmers and ranchers do not operate on Washington timelines. They plan in seasons and generations. We have an opportunity to do our job and deliver the certainty American producers have been asking us for years. This is about more than policy. It's about supporting the people who keep this country running, strengthening rural America, and ensuring that the United States remains the global leader in agriculture. I urge my colleagues to support the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves with 19 and a half minutes. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my distinguished colleague Jonathan Jackson from the state of Illinois.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, my distinguished colleagues, I rise today not merely to speak about a piece of legislation, but to speak about a moral covenant, one that binds this nation to those who till its soil, who rise before dawn and labor until dusk, who ask not for charity, but for fairness, not for sympathy, but for justice. For the Farm Bill in its truer sense is not simply about crops and commodities. It is about the people. It's about dignity of work. It's about whether America will honor the hands that feed her. And so I come today to lift my voice in support of my amendments, numbers 98 and 206, but also to lift a greater truth that public policy, if it is to be righteous, must be rooted in both economic wisdom and moral clarity. My First Amendment directs the Secretary of Agriculture to report to the Congress on the increased cost that American farmers are facing due to rising costs of diesel and fertilizer prices, costs that are a direct result of President Trump's unilateral action to embroil the United States in a protracted war with Iran. We cannot, my friends, turn a blind eye to the burdens facing our farmers. When diesel prices rise, it's not an abstraction. It is a tractor that sits still when fertilizers cost soar. It's not theory. It's a field left barren. And when global conflict disrupts the fragile balance between the supply and demand, between our trade and our partners, it's not distance. It is deeply personal to the farmer whose livelihood hangs in the balance. A nation that depends upon its farmers must not ignore its cries. We must not pass legislation in the darkness of night, when the lights are turned off, when we can use the truth of the light and let the American people see what is being proposed. To demand a full accounting of these rising costs is not a partisan act, it's an act of responsibility. We must hear the cries of the farmers for their food, for their fuel, for their fertilizer. It is the least that we can do for those who give us our daily bread. But there's a deeper issue before us, one that touches the very soul of this legislation. My Second Amendment increases civil rights accountability for employees and officials of the United States Department of Agriculture. Before I proceed, I must pause and pay tribute to a man of great conscience and steadfast courage, my friend and our colleague, Chairman David Scott. Congressman Scott stood as a bridge between policy and principle. He understood that agriculture is not merely an economic enterprise, it is a human enterprise. And he worked tirelessly in these halls to ensure that laws governing our land will reflect the highest ideals of justice and equality. Today we labored to strengthen civil rights protections within this farm bill because we knew that the history of the United States Department of Agriculture has not always been a story of fairness.
Gentleman is recognized for another 30 seconds.
I thank you, Ranking Member Craig. For too long, there were farmers, black farmers, brown farmers, women farmers, who knocked on the doors of opportunity and were turned away, not because of the content of their character, but because of the color of their skin. And we say today with clarity and conviction, no more. No more shall discrimination hide behind bureaucracy. No more shall injustice wear the mask of procedure. No more shall farmers be made to feel like a stranger on their own land. Accountability is not about punishment. It is progress. It is the foundation upon which trust is built. And if this government is to ask its citizen to believe it, then it must prove itself worthy of that belief. My amendment is not radical. It is a righteous piece of legislation. It affirms that those entrusted with public service must also be held to public awards. Mr. Speaker, that justice delayed shall not become justice denied. Mr. Speaker, my friend, the Farm Bill is not just a legislative document. It is a moral document. It speaks to us who are as a nation, which declares that what we value, and it reveals whether we're willing to
Another
match
30 seconds.
our words with our deeds. We will stand with the farmers struggling under rising costs. We will stand with the farmers seeking justice at the hands of this government. I thank you for gracing me with more time. We will stand for fairness, for accountability, and for the dignity of work, and we will remain silent. We will not remain silent in the face of inequity and inequality. I submit to you today that the time for silence has passed. Let us build a farm bill that feeds not only the body, but feeds the soul of America. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you, Ranking Member Craig.
Gentlelady from Minnesota Reserve, gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I thank my good friend from Illinois mentioning our former colleague that we all miss dearly, and David Scott. And that's why I'm proud this bill actually memorializes him by naming the 1890 program permanently in his honor. And I'm sure glad that we did that in the bill markup in committee when he was there versus waiting to do it here on the House floor. I now yield to the gentleman from Iowa, a member of the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Nunn, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Thompson, as well as Ranking Member Craig. This has truly not only been a bipartisan effort, but this is an effort that leads for America. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to speak today on behalf of Iowa's farmers and the millions of Americans who depend on a strong farm economy, known for both food security, something Iowa does very well in, as well as national security, something we've all participated in here. The hardworking men and women who drive Iowa forward, who feed and fuel our country and the world, are the driving force behind this year's Farm Bill, a bill which I believe Congress has worked hard to deliver for them. Whether it be corn or soybeans, pork or cattle, poultry, and as a sixth-generation sheep farm kid, all of our livestock, we are making a positive impact here. During my time, I've spent a lot in the 3rd District of Iowa, talking to all 21 counties, and I'm proud to say in this Farm Bill, with our leadership team, we've been able to pass 21 of my provisions. And that includes everything from helping a beginning farmer, improving water quality, investing in rural broadband, and cracking down on illegal puppy mills. And challengingly, at the start of today, we were set to start debate on passing this bill. But D.C. sometimes does what D.C. does, and Washington deals threaten to undo the hard work we've done across the aisle to deliver for our farmers. But, Mr. Speaker, we stood up. And I apologize to our Speaker because I shouted out on the floor that this Farm Bill has to move forward. And after working through this, a long night indeed, we were able to move forward. I want to thank both Speaker Johnson, the Majority Leader, and the Whip for staying in the room and committing to both sides to have a vote on the Farm Bill and making sure also that we move forward on nationwide, year-round E15 when we come back from recess. This is a bipartisan win for farmers. It is a win for rural Iowa. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, it's a win for all of America. I'm proud to be part of this Farm Bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I yield my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized with 7.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to my distinguished colleague from the state of Maryland, Ms. McLean Delaney.
Gentlelady from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Ranking Member, for yielding. As the only Marylander on the House Ag Committee, I rise to speak about what's at stake in this Farm Bill for our farmers and also for rural America. The ag sector is personal to me, as I grew up in a farming family, in Idaho, a potato farmer's daughter, and right now, farms are being squeezed in every direction. Higher costs due to tariffs, immigration-related labor shortages, and supply chain disruptions. There is a 46% increase in farm bankruptcies this year over last. It is a crisis. USDA is also moving forward with a major reorganization without clear congressional approval. I strongly believe this reorg will cost more in the long run than it saves and will undercut vital services farmers need. A real concern is the loss of decades of institutional knowledge and agency expertise, as USDA civil servants are not uprooting their lives to relocate across the country, which then translates into less technical assistance and ongoing support for our farmers. Equally important, and the reason why I've waited for 6 hours to speak, is pivotal national research is being undermined. Maryland is home to Beltsville's Agricultural Research Center, BARC. BARC is one of the crown jewels of America ag science, and for nearly a century, yes, for nearly 100 years, it has helped farmers fight pests and disease, improved nutrition, housed our nation's bee lab, and protected natural resources. Our Maryland dairy farmers applaud BARC for its work on the screwworm, a horrible parasite devouring livestock across our country. If the administration decommissions places like BARC, we lose decades of expertise that simply cannot be quickly replaced and transferred. It's a travesty. At this moment, our farmers need more certainty, more science, and more support. We must meet the moment. Sadly for me, this Farm Bill does not. It does cut USDA services, it cuts rural funding by 20% compared to 2018, and it does rescind over $1 billion from conservation programs which provide less support for soil health and water quality. And perhaps most heart-wrenching of all these points is this bill fails to restore SNAP, the bipartisan cornerstone of many years of farm bills. USDA revealed that 3 million Americans have already lost benefits since the passage of H.R. 1. In my district, 1 in 9 families rely on SNAP, half of them children. And many of these recipients do work. They just can't make ends meet or on their current take-home wages. To me, this is a moral failure that none of us wants. And these cost allocations for the great state of Maryland are truly unsustainable. While many of us wanted nothing more to work towards a bipartisan farm bill,
Given the above reasons, I urge a no on this legislation. It is my deep hope that there will be future bipartisan work on increasing food assistance for those who need it, for helping USDA, and ensuring vital ag research, particularly at BARC, is preserved. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the gentlelady from Maryland. In the first part of her presentation, she clearly made the case of why we need the Farm Food and National Security Act when she very accurately talked about all the challenges and difficulties our farm families are facing. And just a reminder, we have not cut, SNAP benefits have not been cut. I will yield to the gentlewoman from Florida, a member of the Agriculture Committee, Mrs. Cammack, for 2.5 minutes.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today after years of fighting for this to say, yes, we are finally getting the Farm Bill done. The Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026 is not just a farm bill, it is a lifeline. And for the farmers and ranchers in Florida, the men and women who wake up before the sun, who work through the hurricanes and the freezes and the disease outbreaks, who have been delivering for this country while Washington didn't deliver for them, this moment is long overdue. Now, let me be direct about something. Our farmers, they did not create the chaos of rising input costs. They did not ask for the hurricanes that wiped out their groves and flooded their fields. They did not cause the freezes that killed their crops or the citrus greening that has devastated entire industries. They absorbed it all quietly and stubbornly because that is what our producers do. And for too long, Washington's response has been paperwork delays and disaster programs that didn't meet the moment, did not reflect reality. Mr. Speaker, we all know that food security is national security. Every acre that is abandoned, every grove that is not replanted, every farmer who walks away, that is a strategic loss. Our adversaries understand this, even when people in this very chamber choose to forget it. A nation that cannot feed itself is a nation that is not secure and a nation that can be controlled from abroad. Americans should never have to rely on foreign food. And let us not forget that the first line of defense in American health is not a hospital, but a farm. You cannot feed a healthy nation on substances manufactured in a lab. You need farmers, you need growers, you need ranchers. You need the men and women of this country that are producing real food for real families. That is MAHA. That is MAHA. You cannot fix the health of this nation if you don't pass the Farm Bill. So on behalf of the 44,000 family farms that call Florida home and the nearly 2 million family farms across this country, I strongly urge my colleagues to support this Farm Bill. They are all counting on you. With that, I yield.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserve. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I yield to the gentlewoman from Texas, Vice Chair of the Nutrition and Foreign Agriculture Subcommittee, Mrs. De La Cruz, for a minute and a half.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman. And when I say thank you, I mean thank you, thank you, thank you. It has been 3 long years that we have not been able to pass the most bipartisan farm bill that this chamber has seen. And what the other side of the aisle is saying is completely nonsense. Our chairman has gone from east to west, from north to south, from Democrat to Republican counties and states to see what our farmers truly need. And guess what? This farm bill shows it. The American people who are watching this right now at close to midnight are saying to themselves, what is the holdup? It's been 3 years. This is a bipartisan farm bill. This is a farm bill that meets the needs of the farmers. And guess what? It meets the needs of our American people. It will ultimately lead to lower prices for not only our farmers, but for the everyday American that's buying groceries at the grocery store. This nonsense needs to stop. stop. This bipartisan showcase that is happening tonight must stop. It is time to pass the Farm Bill and not wait a moment longer. Every trade association, every farm association is saying to pass the Farm Bill, and not the activists, but the actual Farm Bill. People who believe that farmers and American national security, farm security, comes first. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
I yield myself more time. I don't really know what I just listened to. There are 700 organizations who are opposing this farm bill. And, you know, maybe Texas, maybe lots of states around this country have a lot of money just to spend, but an unfunded mandate that my Republican colleagues talk about all the time, unfunded mandates, shifting costs to the states for SNAP, that was an unfunded mandate. Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Yeah, I continue to reserve.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is
Mr.
recognized.
Speaker, I'm prepared to close, and I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves, prepared to close. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Republican colleagues here tonight want you to think that this is a farm bill, but it's a collection of Republican excuses. In reconciliation, you cut $187 billion from Title IV of the Farm Bill. That isn't a bipartisan process. President Trump said he would lower costs on day one. Republicans would have us believe that their top priority here tonight is supporting family farmers. What about the tariffs? What about China taking all of its business to Brazil and Argentina? Where are my colleagues in actually standing up for family farmers? My challenge to my Republican colleagues is prove it, because this farm bill does nothing to lower fertilizer costs or diesel costs for farmers or restore food assistance for millions of Americans, children, or seniors. And folks, look, I have created a vision of Lucy with the football so many times on this topic of E15 that I don't even know how to describe it anymore. And the fact that tonight, my friends on the other side of the aisle somehow negotiated to have E15 taken off the table, to me, it's just unbelievable. You destroy all the export markets in our country, and now you refuse to move forward in pushing for those new domestic markets. And look, I know there's probably some deal cut on the side or a gentleman's agreement or whatever, but we're going to be back here in 2 weeks. There's going to be a lot of procedural movement on this thing. And I'm telling you tonight, I do not believe that we will see a vote on E15 come to this House floor. That standing down on E15 was walking away from our family farmers. We will never stand down from looking for these export markets across the world or expanding domestic markets in our country. You know, we offered an amendment that would add another $17 billion in assistance to family farmers, as well as make sure that working families across our country are taken care of by delaying this unfunded mandate to the states. And for the life of me, to come here tonight, whatever time it is, if it's still today, maybe it's tomorrow, and declare that this is a bipartisan product. Our colleagues took about 10% of what we offered. And then they came back and tried to pick off one of us at a time with some little sweetener. Folks, you all can't even figure it out among yourselves on the other side of the aisle. Democrats stand ready to support a truly bipartisan farm bill. My hope is that throughout this process, just like in 2014, just like in 2018, we can come to a bipartisan farm bill, ensuring that the Senate is part of this process. At the end of this debate, I will insert into the record the text of one of my amendments. I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to recommit. Thank you.
The gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I'll use as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chair, what can I say? I'm not sure my good friend, the ranking member, would recognize a bipartisan bill, because this one truly is. This was not written in Washington. This was written traveling the country, Republicans and Democrats, 43 different states, one territory, over close to 160 different listening sessions. We did it in a tripartisan way, Republicans and Democrats. We invited Republicans and Democrats in those given states where we were visiting who were not on the committee. And certainly the tripartisanship was the farmers, the ranchers, the folks of rural America, the people from nutrition organizations, people involved in conservation and wildlife, that all came out to help write this bill. The base bill, when it was in committee, it had 40 provisions in there that was just led by Democrats. I didn't put them in there to gain votes, obviously. It was there because they were good provisions. It contributed to a great product. 140 provisions that were completely bipartisan, at least one Republican and one Democrat, probably more of both on those provisions. As you heard in the amendment process in committee, we had 100 amendments that were debated, and quite frankly, what was accepted was really about 50-50. It was equal. So, you know, I'm not, there must be a definition of bipartisanship I'm just not aware of. This is, and I hear a lot of discussions here tonight about things that are not in the bill, not in their jurisdiction. Things like financial assistance. Hey, I helped lead the first financial assistance over a year ago for our farmers, and we need more, but it's not within the scope of the Farm Bill. I hear about E15. I don't think that's such a bad idea, year-round E15, but that's energy and commerce. That's not the Agriculture Committee. I hear about trade. Well, trade is ways and means. I will say we did double foreign market development and market access program, which is tools to help our farmers take access to trade, but we don't have trade itself in our jurisdiction. And there are no SNAP cuts. The amount of money that families get is the same as what they got under the Biden administration. Now, we increased accountability. If you're here illegally, you're not eligible, because this is something that's really meant for citizens. And we've done enhancements to the SNAP program. We're going after criminals within this Farm Bill. Looking at increasing technology with the EBT cards that prevents misuse of it, enhancements, dairy incentives, adding protein incentives with SNAP. And so, this is a great bill. This is a bill for today. This is a bill also for tomorrow. And I'm proud of the bipartisan work went into it. I'm a little disgusted, actually, by the politics that have come into this. You know, folks that are running for higher office, or they're looking to November. I don't look to the November. I look every day to how we can help our farm families, our ranch families, forestry families, and the everyday Americans who pick up the tools of agriculture, be it a knife, fork, or spoon. And so I do appreciate the opportunity to be able to bring this bill forward and encourage, in the end, a positive vote. And so, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Agriculture printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 119 TAC 22 modified by the amendment printed in Part A of House Report 119 TAC 628 shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as the original bill for purposes of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in Part B of House Report 119 TAC 628 and amendments in block described in Section 3 of House Resolution 1224. Each further amendment printed in Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628, may be offered only in the order printed in the report by the member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to an amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of a question. It shall be in order in any time for the chair of the Committee on Agriculture or his designee to offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628, not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 20 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Agriculture or their designees, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. For what purposes does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Resolution 1224, I offer amendments en bloc.
The clerk will designate the amendments en bloc.
On block number 1, consisting of amendments numbered 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 17, 19, 23, 25, 32, 34, 35, 37, 40, 43, 44, 48, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, and 57, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Thompson of Pennsylvania.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, and the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Craig, each will control 10 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, I yield to the gentleman from Arkansas, Chairman of the Natural Resource Committee, Mr. Westerman, for 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Thompson, for yielding and for your excellent work on this farm bill. I rise in support of my amendment that's included in the en bloc, and also in support of the underlying bill text. My amendment would add biostimulants to the Farm Bill's biochar demonstration project. Biostimulants are substances or microorganisms that stimulate natural plant processes to enhance nutrient uptake and efficiency for crops. Trees are amazing organisms. They're made up of over 1,000 natural chemical compounds that include biostimulants. And like biochar, biostimulants have been used by farmers for decades, but offer potentially new and exciting applications. Further research into these two areas can create a win-win for our fire-prone, overgrown national forest and for farmers across the country. Managing our forest is going to require new markets, and biostimulants offer promise of a market-based solution that would make removal of low-value materials from our national forest more economical while making our farmland more productive. In fact, during President Trump's first term, USDA estimated that biostimulants could become a $5 billion global market. By adding biostimulants to the biochar demonstration project, my amendment will provide more science and understanding that can support farmers, create jobs, and reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire. This amendment does this by allowing biostimulants to be tested in downstream projects in demonstration projects across the country, and by incentivizing new research into biostimulants. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that we were able to work on a bipartisan basis here tonight on this en bloc amendment. It keeps us from having to be here even further into the night. I wish that this process overall was as collaborative on the underlying bill. For example, we supported the addition of the Fedor check number 12. However, this amendment does nothing to address the very real problems that family farmers are facing. Unfortunately, it's the Trump administration's actions which make this study even necessary and timely because of the president's trade war against the world and his actual war against Iran. Farmers have experienced skyrocketing fertilizer prices in addition to other input costs. Had farmers received any warning of these actions, they could have better prepared themselves for the price shocks that they are now feeling. They could have invested in fertilizer storage facilities on their farms so they would have had some place to store their pre-purchased fertilizer needs ahead of these new price spikes. When the war with Iran started, the Secretary said 80% of farmers had already locked in their fertilizer needs, but we know now that that was radically incorrect. According to the American Farm, 7% of farmers in the Midwest knew their fertilizer needs had already been covered, and this was the high watermark for the country. In the South, less than 20% have their needs.
Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you. Were blocked by this Republican majority. 362 amendments were offered to this farm bill by Republicans and Democrats, and 305 of those amendments were blocked. They were blocked. 80% of bipartisan amendments were blocked, 92% of Democratic amendments were blocked, and 70% of Republican amendments were blocked. And my Republican friends, I guess are okay with having the majority leadership block their own amendments. I mean, it is ridiculous. This is an important bill. It's midnight, and we're on the floor debating the Farm Bill, a 5-year authorization. This is shameful. And to block hundreds of good, legitimate amendments by Democrats and Republicans because, what, you don't want to deal with them? You don't want to debate them? It's inconvenient to debate more amendments at midnight? That is ridiculous. The chairman of the committee may be proud of this bill. That's what he says. I'm ashamed that we're bringing a bill like this to the floor, a bill of this significance, and a bill that, quite frankly, is going to have an adverse impact on my constituents. And please don't sugarcoat the SNAP cuts. Millions of people have already lost their SNAP benefits, and the worst hasn't even happened yet. We're going to increase hunger in America. That's not going to make America healthy again by making America hungry again. We could do a hell of a lot better. But blocking hundreds of amendments, Democratic amendments, bipartisan amendments, and Republican amendments, this process stinks. And I urge my colleagues, vote no on this flawed farm bill. Let's start all over again. Let's do this the right way. Let's debate it in the light of day so that the American people know what the hell we're doing here. I yield back my time. I thank the gentlelady.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the Farm Food National Security Act 2026 strengthens SNAP by cracking down on criminals who swipe benefits from EBT cards, increasing access to SNAP nutrition incentive programs, specifically adding protein to those opportunities, and making SNAP online purchasing a permanent option nationwide, which is a tremendous service for perhaps older adults and people living with disabilities that are not able to get to the grocery store. And many of these vendors they're not charging for the shipping. That's something they will do for free. So, yes, I am rather proud of this. Would I sooner be doing this bill? I think my good friends on the Agriculture Committee have heard my golden rule. I'd sooner not do anything after 11 o'clock or midnight, but that is the hand we were dealt here. And quite frankly, our farmers need it, and they need it now. And this was the hand we were dealt for time, so this is when we're getting it done. And I reserve.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
I'll reserve as well.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I reserve, prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves.
Prepared to close.
Gentlelady, sorry? Gentleman for Pennsylvania is recognized to close.
Who does closing first?
You can reserve back to her, and so if you wish. You can also
Well, I'm not sure who closes, but let me just say a few minutes, and then I'll yield back for the gentlelady to do the same. It's kind of interesting. I'm hearing good things about bipartisanship in this en bloc. This en bloc is about half of the amendments that we have on the Farm Food and National Security Act. So, just a few minutes ago, I heard there was completely no bipartisanship, and now I'm hearing good things about bipartisanship. So, again, there must be a different definition for bipartisanship than the one that I normally follow. So, with that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania yields. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, better late than never, bipartisanship. We are happy to agree to this en bloc amendment, and be proud to support it. I just want to say that some of the rhetoric, though, coming out and the lack of fact-based, it's not that you cut the dollar amount of SNAP per day for eligible individuals. You've just cut people from the program entirely. and you shoved cost onto several states across this country that are just not going to be able to absorb those costs. And we know, and CBO expects, that those states are going to have to kick people off the program. So we work together to make this a little more efficient. And with that, I'll yield my time.
Gentlelady from Minnesota yields. The question is on the amendments en bloc offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The en bloc amendments are agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Baumgartner of Washington.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of my amendment, and I would like to yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment would include the Columbia Basin project in the Western Waters Regional Conservation Area. This area here would be included in this larger green area. Let's start with the facts. The Columbia Basin project spans nearly 1.1 million acres in central Washington. One of the most, 85, gives the USDA discretion to prioritize conservation investments. This amendment simply ensures that the Columbia Basin is given due consideration for programs like the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. It's not a mandate, it's not a change in water rights, it's not a new bureaucracy. And if included, the Western Waters Critical Conservation Area, the Columbia Basin Project land area will provide fertile ground to build irrigation and water conservation projects. This will provide targeted access to federal tools and support structure to help farmers to use it more efficiently, improve soil health, and bring more to land into productive, sustainable use. If we are serious about conservation in the West, which we certainly should be, and it's something that Republicans and Democrats, I think, share together, we need to work with the lands and work on projects like this. This is a practical amendment, it is a pro-farmer amendment, and it is a smart use of water policy for the future. I urge adoption, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. The Columbia Basin Project is a federally authorized project managed by the Bureau of Reclamation, part of the Department of Interior. At its heart is the Grand Coulee Dam, which has the primary purpose of supplying water for irrigation and producing power. There are secondary benefits, such as aiding flood control and providing recreation opportunities. The Western Waters Regional Conservation Area, by contrast, is designated by the Department of Agriculture as a critical conservation area whose primary purpose is to address insufficient water and habitat. I am concerned, therefore, that this amendment may divert funds meant for drought relief toward areas that have a dam supplying them water. If the gentleman sincerely believes that there are farmers in need of USDA assistance, then I would be happy to work with him when NRCS completes its review of CCAs every 5 years. With that, I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I'd like to yield to Chair Thompson.
Gentleman's recognized.
Well, I thank the gentleman for offering the amendment. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to travel to his area and to just see how critical this amendment is. Water is life-giving. Water is about being able to obviously provide for food. This amendment will ensure that areas of the Columbia Basin Project will be included in the Western Waters Regional Conservation Area. Including this area within that designation would allow for more opportunities for conservation activities in this region. I support this amendment and urge a yes vote. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from Washington reserves and is prepared to close. Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized with 4 minutes.
Yes, I am also prepared to close.
Gentlelady reserves.
Oh, I reserve. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Gentleman's recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the 119th Congress has done a lot of great work, and I think this underlying farm bill is certainly going to be a highlight of that great work. I've enjoyed my first term in Congress immensely, And I enjoy being in this august chamber with so many talented Republicans and Democratic colleagues. You know, there are two written things in this chamber. One is the statement, "In God we trust." The other is the quote by the good representative from Massachusetts, Daniel Webster, which is above your head. And I will just close by reading a portion of that statement. I think about that frequently when we vote here. I don't think, frankly, all the time that everything we vote on rises to fulfill the statement that is listed in this chamber. But as the great Daniel Webster said, "Let us develop the resources of our land and call upon their powers so that we in our time may do something that will be remembered." I think when Franklin Delano Roosevelt worked with Republicans and Democrats to develop the Columbia Basin Project, they did something that called forth the powers of the land, something that was remembered and benefited many future generations. I think with the adoption of this amendment to include this portion in our water conservation efforts, we are doing something that will benefit future generations. With that, Mr. Speaker, I close.
Gentleman from Washington yields, and the gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I expressed in my earlier remarks, I continue to oppose this amendment, and I urge all members to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Washington. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Text 628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Bentz of Oregon.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Bentz, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer my amendment designated Bentz number 2, which modestly expands the definition of renewable biomass under the renewable fuel standard so that it includes materials generated in the manufacture of forest products, such as mill residuals, wood chips, bark, sawdust, and shavings. The amendment would also amend the current statutory framework to include as renewable biomass trees, shrubs, and slash from our federal forests, tribal forests, non-federal land, and public lands, rather than being limited to a small part of these lands. This amendment would allow materials from these sources to be economically used for domestic biofuel production. I thank Chairman Westerman, Congressman Fulcher, and Congressman Stauber for their support of this amendment. The amendment falls within the Farm Bill under Title 8, Forestry, and Title 9, Energy. Consistent with these titles, this amendment will incentivize the removal of excess fuel from our forests, thus reducing fire risk and improving forest health. And it will make possible the productive use of what otherwise would be considered waste. For too long, federal policy has treated wood fiber from federal lands in only two ways, either as merchantable saw timber with commercial value or as waste with no value whatsoever. This policy ignores an entire category of low-value woody material that could be removed from federal forests, including slash, limbs, storm debris, thinning materials, small diameter trees, and other byproducts that do not fit neatly into traditional lumber markets, but still carry real economic value. And this amendment would help realize on that value. Mr. Chairman, my amendment is a practical fix. It treats federal forest material as an opportunity, not a liability. It creates value where federal policy currently perpetuates waste, and it provides land managers, mills, and rural communities with another tool to make federal forests healthier, more productive, and less dangerous. I urge adoption of the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purposes does the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wildfires are a significant threat to rural communities, and I support efforts to bring down the cost of forest treatments that would help protect these communities. This amendment, though, just uses those rural communities as a prop in order to disguise the fact that it would expand the renewable fuel standards definition to every single tree across our public lands. It is not limited to the wildland urban interface where thinning would have the most impact, there are no limits on this, not for protected wilderness, beloved recreation areas, or old growth. It does not matter if the tree is cut down as part of a responsible forest restoration project or a clear cut. This proposal is reckless and would endanger our public lands. I urge my colleagues to oppose. And with that, I reserve.
Gentlelady reserved. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield 2 minutes of my time to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of my friend from Oregon, Mr. Bentz's amendment. This may be the most simple, straight to the point, easy to understand amendment. It does one thing. It corrects the definition of woody biomass. Mr. Chairman, this amendment clarifies that woody biomass is biomass that comes from wood. Yes, Mr. Chairman, you heard that right. Woody biomass is biomass that comes from wood, and this amendment would fix that definition. Mr. Chairman, only in the federal government would this clarification be required. For the love of trees everywhere and for basic human understanding, I encourage everyone to support this amendment, and I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Oregon reserves. Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentlelady from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank Mr. Bentz, Mr. Westerman for their work on this issue. It is a very simple proposal, and I think the most important thing for the forestry industry, and the forestry industry is not healthy right now, and it doesn't matter if it's the logger or the person who drives the truck or the person who actually owns the land with the trees on it. It creates value for what otherwise would be waste. It's a good amendment. It's a simple amendment, and I encourage the adoption of it. And again, I thank Mr. Bentz and Mr. Westerman for their work on this issue. With that,
reserve.
Gentleman from Oregon reserves. Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlelady from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
We're prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, this is an excellent bill, and we need it in Oregon. We have 30 million acres of trees, and we absolutely need what this bill would provide. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to oppose this amendment, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
I'd like to request the yeas and nays.
Does the gentlelady request a recorded vote?
Yes. I'd
Pursuant
like
to
to
Clause
request
6
a
of Rule
recorded
18, further
vote.
proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Text 628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise as the designee for the gentlewoman from California, Mrs. Brownlee, and I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Brown of Ohio.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Ohio and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio.
I give myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
The NRCS currently includes composting facility as a conservation practice standard, but assistance under this standard is limited to the construction of a structure to facilitate composting. This amendment proposes specifically to designate composting as a practice standard that is not tied to a structure, but simply on activities to produce compost from organic waste. The amendment also requires review of the current composting facility practice standard and has provisions to address greenhouse gas emissions. This proposal would allow farms that use compost to more fully participate in and benefit from conservation programs regardless of whether they build a structure. This could also reduce food waste, and I support the amendment. With that, I reserve.
Gentlelady from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition, although I'm not opposed this amendment.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I think the gentlelady from California who offered this amendment, improving conservation practice standards and further incorporating science, technology, innovation throughout the programs has been a priority for me as this bill has been developed. This Farm Bill contains language requiring USDA to more frequently update the practice standards and on a reoccurring basis, along with a robust public process to gather input, requests, and suggestions. While NRCS already does have an existing practice standard to cover the construction of a structure to facilitate the composting process, this amendment goes beyond that to create a new standard for the production and/or use of compost. And while I don't view these particular activities to be specified in the programs or in need of a separate standard, I am going to support this amendment today. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves.
Mr. Speaker, once again, or Mr. Chairman, once again, I support and encourage members, I encourage the adoption of this amendment into the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
I'm prepared to close.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I urge all members to support, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Ohio. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 4, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Text 628. For what purpose the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Carvajal of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from California, Mr. Carvajal, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today to encourage every member of this chamber to support my Dairy Business Innovation Initiative amendment. The Dairy Business Innovation Initiatives support dairy businesses in the development, production, marketing, and distribution of dairy products. They provide technical assistance to dairy businesses directly or through industry experts and research institutions. USDA initially awarded 3 equal grants through a competitive selection process to the University of Tennessee, Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and the University of Wisconsin. While a 4th initiative was later awarded by USDA in 2021 to the Pacific Coast Coalition Dairy Business Innovation Initiative, DBII, at Fresno State University, which serves California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and 135 grantees from 34 congressional districts. Even with the addition of the 4th initiative, congressional appropriations has consistently directed the majority of funds to be equally distributed between the 3 original initiatives outside the Pacific Coast Coalition region. That's even when accounting for California being ranked number 1 in milk production, number 1 in butter, number 1 in milk powder, number 1 in ice cream, and number 2 in cheese with over 140 manufacturing facilities. Despite the Pacific Coast Coalition's region of 6 states producing 29% of all milk in the U.S. and 45% of total exports, they still do not get an equal amount of funding. My amendment simply would update the statute to recognize that there are 4 regionally located initiatives and ensure that each of these initiatives are accounted for when funding is administered, just achieving parity. This could also allow for more equitable distribution of funding between the 4 initiatives, which has historically not been the case since the inception of the Pacific Coast Coalition. So again, I ask this body to join me in passing my amendment to ensure more equitable distribution between the 4 dairy business innovation initiatives. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purposes the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Rise in opposition of the amendment, although I'm not opposed to the amendment.
Without objections, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate my good friend from California, Salud Carbajal, for bringing this amendment forward that aligns underlying statute with current practice at the USDA. This is another great bipartisan improvement to this farm bill. The Dairy Business Innovation Initiative supports dairy businesses in the development, production, marketing, and distribution of their products. The technical assistance and subawards provide under this program play an important role in supporting the profitability of our nation's dairy producers. USDA currently supports 4 centers, as you've heard, located in California, Tennessee, Vermont, and Wisconsin. And this amendment allows the statute of DBII to bring certainty to all 4 centers. Now, I'm supportive of this amendment, and I urge all my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for speaking on the merits of this amendment. With that, I'll reserve.
Gentleman has the only time left.
With that, I will close and yield.
Gentleman's recognized. Gentleman yields.
Yes.
Gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment's agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 5, printed Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise as a designee for the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver, and I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Hayes of Connecticut.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlelady from Connecticut, Ms. Hayes, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Connecticut.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment, which is based on the Bipartisan Trees Act. The Forest Service has long supported urban and community forestry, especially since a single tree can reduce energy cost of homes by 8 to 12%. That's why Democrats provided $1.5 billion for the Urban and Community Forest Program at the Forest Service in the Inflation Reduction Act. Of course, Republicans were not satisfied to just let that program continue, so they rescinded the remaining money in H.R. 1, along with the $187 billion in SNAP funding cuts. The existing urban and community forestry program requires a 50% cost share. However, while the program established by Representative Cleaver's amendment would provide up to 90%, I support this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to this amendment, although I'm not opposed to the amendment.
Without objections, the member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the gentlelady for representing the gentleman from Missouri for his amendment that he's offered. This amendment would require the Secretary of Agriculture to establish a tree planting grant program that results in a reduction of residential energy consumption. It's as simple. More trees make for more livable and enjoyable communities. And at that point, I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have nothing more. I just urge all members to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Okay, good enough. Well, thank the gentleman from Missouri and the gentlelady from Connecticut for serving as his proxy this evening on this, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Connecticut. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment's agreed to. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 7, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Text 628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Crawford of Arkansas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today on behalf of rural communities in support of my amendment, which clarifies that USDA Circuit Rider Program activities that are necessary to prevent imminent harm to life or property shall be treated as accepted activities during government shutdowns. The USDA Circuit Rider Program is a hugely successful initiative that provides necessary technical expertise and training to rural communities. The technical expertise is critical to communities to operate safe and clean drinking water systems and helps ensure compliance with current water regulations. Circuit riders, as these experts are referred to, are in the field every day helping these communities with water system compliance, operations, maintenance, management, and training. Additionally, this assistance protects the federal government's sizable investment in rural water infrastructure. Under most government shutdowns, the Circuit Rider Program has been deemed essential because of the critical role it plays to prevent imminent harm to life and property until the most recent shutdown in October. Circuit riders routinely serve as first responders for the rural water sector, providing immediate assistance during system failures, water quality violations, natural disasters, and other emergencies, often as the only available technical resource. Therefore, it's essential, even during a government shutdown, that this program continues. My amendment simply clarifies that during a lapse in appropriations, the Circuit Rider Program will continue to be funded and operational. Even during a government shutdown, folks in rural communities continue to need safe and clean drinking water. And for that reason, I strongly urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition? Connecticut.
Mr. Speaker, I rise and claim time in opposition, but am not opposed to the amendment itself, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I rise in support of this amendment. USDA technical assistance for rural water systems is key to maintaining their safety and effectiveness. This is a common sense approach to governance that would ensure that the Circuit Rider Program would be available to rural communities that rely on it during government shutdowns. These professionals help small communities with management, regulatory compliance, water quality, and infrastructure maintenance to ensure sustainable service. I support this amendment, and I urge all of my colleagues to support it as well. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserved. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage of this amendment, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to support Mr. Crawford's amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment's agreed to. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 8, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Text 628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Crawford of Arkansas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to introduce my bipartisan hot rotisserie chicken amendment, number 8 to H.R. 7567, Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. My amendment seeks to add hot rotisserie chicken to the list of foods eligible for SNAP recipients to purchase. By expanding access to hot rotisserie chicken, we're providing families with a high-quality, nutrient-dense protein source. This directly aligns with the new dietary guidelines for Americans established by the Department of Agriculture and is a step toward making America healthy again. Hot rotisserie chicken is available at most local grocery stores that accept SNAP and is often around $5 or $6. That's a great bargain considering the multiple meals you can get from one chicken, plus there's no financial burden on the taxpayer associated with this amendment. Currently, SNAP participants may only purchase cold rotisserie chicken, which is simply refrigerated hot chicken. This requirement not only degrades quality but also wastes energy and adds unnecessary cost. Additionally, some Americans lack easy access to reheating methods, making it difficult for them to warm and consume the cold rotisserie chicken. By allowing the purchase of hot rotisserie chicken, we give families the opportunity to use it as a meal or as an ingredient in countless recipes, such as chicken salad, enchiladas, soups, casseroles, and the list goes on and on. This meaningful change will allow families to enjoy a wider variety of wholesome meals. Governors from states around the country and my great state of Arkansas have pending waiver requests at the USDA to allow their states to make hot rotisserie chicken SNAP eligible. Their leadership demonstrates the growing recognition that this amendment is not only practical and targeted, but essential to our constituents. Together, we can make our nutrition assistance programs more effective and make a positive impact on American families with this sensible, targeted addition. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. While I agree with the premise of this amendment, I'm not interested in picking winners and losers. The Hot Foods Act addresses this issue the right way by ensuring that all foods that are hot at the point of sale can be purchased with SNAP benefits, including not just pre-cooked rotisserie chickens, but hot sandwiches, soups, and much more. This amendment lacks the proper guardrails to avoid unintentional opening up to SNAP to restaurants. This fix should be allowed to all hot foods. I will be opposing this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to vote no as well. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
I'd like to recognize the distinguished chairman of the House Ag Committee, Mr. G.T. Thompson.
Gentleman is recognized.
Well, I thank my good friend from Arkansas for raising this issue. We can all agree that rotisserie chicken is a healthy and convenient option for families. SNAP was designed by Congress to purchase food at eligible retailers to be cooked and prepared at home, meaning hot prepared food are not eligible for purchase at this point. I have concerns about the unintended consequences that may arise should Congress begin to chip away piecemeal at the ban on hot food and SNAP without considering the broader ramifications, particularly for program integrity. Change of this kind, especially one that singles out a specific food item, presents a slippery slope and deserves careful consideration and debate about the purpose of SNAP. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Arkansas reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge adoption of the amendment and yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have.
Recorded vote.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas will be postponed. It is now in order to consider the amendment number 14 printed in Part B of House Report 119, Text 628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 14, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Perez of Washington.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Perez, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Washington.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chair, today I rise in support of my amendment to direct the Secretary of Agriculture, in coordination with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to develop a low-risk classification for healthy, fresh fruits and vegetables and other foods that are typically consumed raw. And I'd like to tell the body a little bit about how this came to be. I have a 4-year-old. I was touring a daycare, like many in our state, and I learned a daycare worker came up to me and she asked me, hey, Congress lady, why can I legally open a bag of chips for the toddlers, but I can't peel a banana? Which was perplexing and annoying to me, and I dug into this, and I kept asking questions. And what I heard from regulators and licensors over and over and over was that this woman was stupid, that her boss had lied to her, that she just didn't understand the rules. And when I dug and I dug and I dug, what I found was that, yes, buried deep in the bowels of the 1,200 pages of documents a licensed daycare provider has to follow in my state, a number of sinks they would need per exterior linear wall foot. I am not kidding. And this daycare would have needed 6 more sinks before they could legally peel a banana, because peeling a banana, apparently, is considered food preparation. But opening a bag of chips is not. And I doubt anyone on God's green earth would have chosen to advantage Cheetos over a banana. But that is what has happened through a lack of respect and regard for people who actually work in childcare, through candidly, an establishment that is so old they don't have kids in daycare, or so rich that they had nannies instead of, ordinary daycare. But what this body, I am so proud of this body for listening to this issue, for hearing me, and for helping me to find a way to legitimize fresh fruits and vegetables in daycares again. And so what this does is it directs the Secretary of Ag to develop a list of food. It says, look, handling a raw chicken cutlet is not the same thing as peeling a banana. Let's have a different classification. Let's post these on a website somewhere. And let's say that states who are taking money for child care will not negatively impact the licenses of daycare centers based on their provision of these foods to children, given a hand-washing sink is available. A very simple, common sense, right-sizing of legislation. And one that I have heard from people across the country. This is not an issue just in my state. This is across the country where legislation has not paid attention or genuflection to people actually doing the work of taking care of children, who has mistaken following a checklist with care for children. Those are not the same things. And we need to empower the people who are actually doing the work. We need to bring down the cost of childcare, and that's what this legislation does. And I am so grateful to the body for working with me to find a way to do this. And I reserve the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to seek claim time in opposition.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself such time as he may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, while I appreciate my colleagues' interest in ensuring that children in child care have access to healthy and fresh foods whenever possible, this amendment, unfortunately, as written, could wind up doing more harm than good. Child care has been underfunded for decades, leading to an inadequate supply of programs, high cost of families, and low wages for providers. According to the Department of Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary of Planning and Evaluation, only 15% of federally eligible children currently receive subsidies under the Child Care and Development Fund, and many more don't even qualify for the fund who actually need the assistance. That's why I introduced with the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Lee, the Child Care for Working Families Act, which would make historic investments in child care to raise the pay and improve access to families. This amendment, submitted by the gentlelady from Washington, requires the Secretaries of Health and Human Services and Agriculture to, quote, update relevant nutrition and food safety preparation regulations and guidelines that are, quote, related to nutrition and food safety preparation in child care facilities. This amendment provides broad discretion for the secretaries to usurp state and local food safety guidelines, and if states don't conform their child care regulations to whatever the secretaries deem appropriate, they could lose funding, which, as I indicated, is already inadequate. There are no real guardrails to the scope of the changes that the secretaries could propose under the amendment, and states could be punished if they do not adopt the same standards as mandated by the secretaries. This amendment, therefore, is too broad, allows too much discretion to an administration which has already shown its willingness to cancel or freeze funding for social service programs in democratic states. For these reasons, Mr. Chairman, I oppose the amendment and urge my colleagues to do the same and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
I think we all agree that child care is underfunded. What we don't agree about here is the question of whether and how to appropriately fund it, and who is the one who decides where those dollars should go. I would say that in my case, in the case of the daycare worker I was speaking with, they would have had to install 6 more sinks to comply with the regulations as written. How much money do you think that takes? Do you think that's going to make daycares stretch further and provide more daycare to more families? No, these rules were not written, they were not perfect. We should not treat legislation as if it's manifest from God in a perfect form on our notebooks. The reality is that doing legislation is more similar to doing the dishes, where you do the dishes to do the dishes to do the dishes. It's never done, and you have to keep going back to the people who are actually doing the implementation of it. To understand if it's being implemented and if it's the point of the legislation. Nobody wanted us to spend these limited dollars installing myriad sinks, maybe the plumbing industry, but I doubt that. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman for Virginia is recognized.
Do you want time? Okay. Well, I'd give myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Other than to say that that assumes that the federal regulations that they come up with will be better than what they've already come up with. This could be worse, could be better. The problem is if you don't actually comply, you could lose your funding, and I think that would be a step backward. So I would hope we would oppose the amendment as it's written, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Washington is recognized with 1 minute remaining.
I yield to my colleague from Pennsylvania.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady for bringing forward this common sense amendment. You know, we're talking about archaic regulations. We're not talking about payments or anything like that. We're talking about peeling a banana, or preparing an apple slice, preparing a carrot. We want kids to eat healthy versus prepackaged processed foods. This amendment would ensure that USDA, the food safety experts, and HHS, the child care regulators, work together to ensure that child care regulations governing the preparation and handling of low-risk fruits and vegetables do not present unnecessary red tape for providers. I appreciate the gentlelady. I encourage a yes vote, and I yield back whatever time's left to the gentlelady.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
States that choose to negatively impact the licenses of daycare providers based on their provision of a peeled banana to a child, I think we ought to consider whether or not that's the best place for us to be spending our limited federal resources. I reserve the remainder of my time.
Has expired. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the assumption is that regulations that these secretaries will get together and provide will be better than what's already there. We don't know what they're going to come up with. We do know, however, that if the local people don't comply exactly with those regulations, they're going to lose funding. There's broad discretion on the secretaries, and as I've said, these secretaries have been known to cancel programs in Democratic states. I don't think that broad discretion is appropriate, and I hope we defeat the amendment. And I yield back the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
yields. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Washington. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment's agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 15, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
At the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 15, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 7567, the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026, and in particular my amendment number 15 to ensure Arizona farmers are not left behind. The Colorado River is the lifeblood of the desert Southwest. In my state, it sustains families, small agricultural businesses, and entire rural communities. Yet today, the lifeline is under growing strain, not just from drought, but from broken commitments. Under the Mexican Water Treaty of 1944, Mexico is obligated to deliver 1.75 million acre-feet of water to the United States. The deadline passed in October of 2025, and once again, Mexico failed to meet its obligation. Meanwhile, Arizona continues to deliver water in good faith. That imbalance has real consequences. It means lost crops, lost income, and increased uncertainty for hardworking producers already operating on razor-thin margins. My amendment is straightforward. It directs the Secretary of Agriculture to provide Congress with a full accounting of the tools and programs available to assist Arizona producers impacted by those losses, just as the base bill already does for Texas. If we're going to address the consequences of treaty noncompliance, we must do comprehensively and fairly. This is about accountability. It's about preparedness. It's about standing with American farmers when they are forced to shoulder burdens not of their own making. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment number 15 and pass the Farm Bill, and with that I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman's amendment would require the Secretary of Agriculture to produce a report on ways to help Arizona, one of 7 states in the Colorado River Basin, due to a lack of water. This amendment also seems to imply that because Texas did not receive its water allotment through the 1944 Water Treaty, it is Arizona producers who should receive extra financial assistance. I've supported many amendments from my Texas colleagues who have rightly complained that Mexico has not met its obligations under that treaty, but it is Texas producers who suffered as a result. If the gentleman believes that the Colorado Basin states also experienced some loss, why restrict his amendment only to Arizona? So with that, I oppose the gentleman's amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I yield as much time as he will consume to the chairman of the full committee.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I thank the gentleman from Arizona, a good friend, Congressman Gosar, for offering this amendment, and President Trump for a successful negotiation with Mexico regarding their water treaty obligations. It is important that producers are as well informed as possible of the many programs out there to help the losses due to a lack of water, and this amendment is a great way to do so. I support this amendment, and I urge a yes vote, and I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Arizona reserved. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Yes, you know, if the gentlelady would have known, Arizona is the terminal ending out of Mexico of getting, and they have to take the cuts. And so we've taken several cuts, and there's plenty of members from the other basin states, but they can actually look at those as well. So this is about the state of Arizona taking terminal ending of the Colorado River, taking cuts. And with that, I would ask everybody to vote for my amendment and to vote for the Farm Bill. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment's agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 16, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 16, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of H.R. 7567, the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026, and in strong support of my amendment number 16 to restore fairness for ranchers in Arizona and across the Southwest. For years, ranchers have lived with the realities of predation from the Mexican wolf. They've understood the balance between conservation and livelihoods. But what they cannot accept is a federal standard that makes it nearly impossible to receive compensation when their cattle are killed. Under current guidance issued by the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, ranchers must prove depredation primarily through subcutaneous hemorrhaging, which is blood that forms under the skin. Now, in the harsh desert climate, where heat and scavengers can quickly degrade a carcass, that standard is often unrealistic and unworkable. Before 2023, federal policy allowed multiple forms of evidence to confirm predation. Sticky paper. My approach simply restores that common sense approach. It ensures that ranchers are not denied reimbursement because of overly narrowed and impractical rules. This is about fairness. It's about recognizing real-world conditions on the ground, and it's about standing with men and women who feed this country. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment number 16 and pass the Farm Bill. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, this amendment forces USDA to revise the existing APHIS evidence standards for livestock depredations by Mexican wolves. It unwisely directs APHIS to update its standards to ignore traumatic bruising, which is, of course, clear physical evidence that the animal was attacked while alive rather than simply picked at by scavengers after it died for unrelated reasons. The current standards already have provisions in place for making determinations in instances where there may be little to no evidence of subcutaneous hemorrhaging. USDA reimburses producers for 100% of the value of animals killed by Mexican gray wolves, but there are just a handful of those wolves left who still call the United States home. This proposal would open the door for USDA to cover the cost of many more livestock per year than those few wolves could possibly kill. Virtually any livestock death could be attributed to Mexican wolves because you wouldn't need to observe the primary indicator of a live attack. I support the assistance we provide to producers who experience losses to wolves, but unfortunately, I cannot support this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Yeah, I would like to address the gentlelady first. Obviously, she doesn't, the previous standards were used from 2004 to 2022 by W. George Bush, Obama, and the beginning of Biden's terms. So if the Democrats disagree, do they disagree with Obama's agricultural policy as well? And with that, I yield to the gentleman from the full committee chairman, Mr. G.T. Thompson.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman from Arizona for offering this amendment. This is an issue I heard about years ago when we started this process of preparing for this Farm Bill. Actually, it was from the president of the Arizona Farm Bureau who brought it to my attention. These are Mexican wolves that are coming across the border and doing tremendous damage. So ensuring that our livestock producers are able to more accurately receive indemnification of livestock depredations by Mexican wolves, and yet another step to continue to provide producers with the most adequate coverage possible. Providing new evidence standards within the Livestock Indemnity Program will no doubt help more accurately determine depredations for unfortunate losses. I support this amendment and I urge a yes vote, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Yeah, once again, I'm only asking for fairness because what we see here on the ground was there were other ways of looking at this. And they're not asking for handouts. They're wanting just to be treated fairly. And with that, I ask for my amendment to be actually adopted, and I would like them to actually do the Farm Bill. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment's agreed to. It's now in order to consider amendment number 18, printed in Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628. For what purposes? Gentleman from Arizona seek recognition.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 18, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona.
It's Resolution 1224. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of H.R. 7567, the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026, and in support of my amendment number 18. This bipartisan common sense amendment puts guardrails on taxpayer dollars by restricting the USDA funding for animal research conducted in adversarial nations like China and Russia, countries that pose clear risks to our national security. In recent years, Americans have seen the consequences of risky, unaccountable research conducted overseas. Yet despite these lessons, federal dollars have continued to flow to foreign labs, including collaborations tied to entities associated with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. My amendment ensures that it does not happen without serious consequences or justification. It prohibits the USDA funding for such research unless there is a compelling national security or public and animal health need and requires Congress to be notified in advance. This is about accountability. It's about safeguarding taxpayer dollars. And it's about ensuring Americans' resources are not used in frivolous ways that could undermine our own safety. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment number 18 and pass the Farm Bill, and with that I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Though I understand wholeheartedly my colleague's position on this topic, I must oppose this amendment. The United States benefits from broad animal disease monitoring networks that extend worldwide. Through these scientific connections, our scientists here at home can prepare for and mitigate new and emerging pathogens that would affect livestock here in America. Global health and safety also depends on shared data. And just because we remove ourselves from collaborative efforts doesn't mean the research stops. We simply remove ourselves from receiving any of the benefits shared research could yield. This amendment would also prohibit education activities on animal research in those countries, and I would ask my colleagues, do we really want to limit education that could prevent the next outbreak of a zoonotic disease, even if the education is in a country of concern? I, for one, am not eager to see another pandemic threaten the United States and understand the devastating risks if we are isolated and alone against these threats. I humbly oppose this amendment and strongly encourage our colleagues to vote no. I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Obviously, the gentlelady is not understanding the bill. My amendment ensures that it does not happen without serious justification. Yeah, you can share information, but you also have to have the parameters. I'm a dentist, so I understand these things. You have to have the parameters and safety aspects, which were not followed in the Wuhan COVID-19 situation. So with that, you need the proper protocols and the proper aspects. And it still allows for the public financing of doing that, but it has to be justified. That's what we want, accountability and transparency. And with that, I yield to the gentleman, the chairman of the full committee.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman from Arizona for bringing forward this amendment. I think it's really important to understand what is and what is not in this amendment. Preventing USDA from entering into unnecessary research relationships with adversarial nations, such as China and Russia, it really is a critical step in ensuring the security of our U.S. research infrastructure. It's even more important when doing so prevents unnecessary research on vertebrate species. This amendment affirms actions that have already been taken by the administration to prevent this type of work while still allowing for narrow waiver authority in the case of unavoidable research in the name of national security. So I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves. Gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I continue to urge all members to oppose this amendment, again, while I understand the perspectives and the point of views of the majority. Again, eliminating ourselves from the opportunity to engage in shared research to the benefit of the health and wellness and the lives of all American people. We cannot support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Well, once again, affording this type of legislation, it's about affording COVID or the Wuhan virus or anything else that may come about this. So we have to make sure that we are accountable to the scientific methodology and to the patients and to the public and to the citizens of this country. This is about fairness. It's also about transparency and accountability. So with that, I ask all folks to vote for my amendment, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Question on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment's agreed to. It is now in order to consider the amendment number 20 printed in Part B of House Report 119, Tax 628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 20, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Grothman of Wisconsin.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Thank you. My amendment will help continue to strengthen the recent SNAP reforms by requiring a report on the SNAP-eligible food pilot programs and directing the Department of Agriculture to provide Congress with recommendations on potential updates to the definition of eligible foods under the program. SNAP is one of the largest nutrition programs in the country. It's intended to help low-income Americans put food on the table, and it plays an essential role in supporting families in need. At the same time, it is funded by taxpayers, and we have a responsibility to ensure it is working as intended. As part of the broader nutrition programs in this bill, Congress has taken steps to strengthen the connection between federal nutrition programs and improved health outcomes. This is part of the MAHA movement. This amendment supports that effort by ensuring we evaluate the results of SNAP pilot programs and make informed, data-driven decisions about the program's future. We know there's a growing concern about how taxpayer dollars are being used within SNAP, particularly regarding which types of foods are eligible for purchase. It's something I hear about every time I go to the grocery store. Through recent reforms, Congress authorized pilot programs allowing states to test ways to better align SNAP purchases with healthier food options. This amendment ensures that work continues by requiring USDA to report back to Congress on the feasibility, implementation, and effectiveness of these pilots, along with recommendations for any necessary statutory changes. It takes a measured approach, gathering the facts first and allowing Congress to make thoughtful decisions based on real-world results. Ultimately, this is about improving outcomes for family, providing better nutrition, and ensuring responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars. I look forward to it leading to a thinner, healthier America. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise and claim the time in opposition, but am not opposed to the amendment itself, and I yield to myself such time as I may consider.
Without objection, gentlelady recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support promoting healthier diets and lifestyles for all Americans, but I have serious concerns with any policy that would make life more difficult for Americans who are already struggling to make ends meet, and for many, like my constituents, that live in food deserts. We shouldn't make a program that is supposed to provide relief too confusing and too frustrating for anyone to want to participate in or be able to participate in. And it's not that SNAP recipients buy different foods than other Americans. USDA research has shown that SNAP participants purchase foods at rates similar to non-participants. Despite this, USDA has now approved 22 different state waivers, each of which have different restrictions on what can be purchased with SNAP through restriction pilot programs. One restricts soda and candy. One restricts soda and energy drinks. One restricts soda, energy drinks, candy, and prepared desserts. And another one restricts candy, candy-coated items, gum, licorice, mints, fruit, leathers, sweetened baking, chocolate, fruits or nuts with any sugar or honey added, granola bars, unless they include flour. Benefited many states, including mine, which provides grants to states and local organizations in all states and territories to teach people how to stretch their SNAP dollars, cook healthy meals, and lead active lifestyles, was eliminated in the Big Ugly Bill. The cherry on top is that these restriction pilots depend on the now non-existent SNAP-Ed program to evaluate their effectiveness. The study proposed in this amendment can provide valuable data about the lack of effectiveness of the waivers, though it is certainly not going to be making up for the loss of SNAP-Ed. And I cannot emphasize enough that we must seek to restore the funding to this essential program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves. Does the gentleman seek unanimous consent to reclaim his time? Gentleman from Wisconsin.
Yes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Just one follow-up there on that. We talk about making life easier. Life is easier if you don't become diabetic. Life is easier if you're thinner. As the result, the overall effect of this amendment will to make life easier for people. And you got to remember, a lot of this food bought on food stamps is going to wind up on the table of young children. So we particularly want to look out for them.
Gentleman yield.
I yield.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I thank the gentleman and I thank the chairman. I want to thank the gentleman for bringing this forward amendment. I think it's important for Congress to get more information from USDA and states on the pilot projects to restrict SNAP purchases as it is this body who ultimately decides what changes, if any, are made permanently at the federal level. So I've looked warily at USDA offering all these waivers. Today, 22 states have been approved by USDA to test a ban, and I appreciate my colleague from Hawaii really laying out just the confusion and chaos. I guess we'll look at it as a laboratories of innovation to test a ban on the purchase of certain food and beverages with SNAP benefits. I think they missed the mark because the average SNAP beneficiary uses at least 3 forms of payment and plenty of their own cash or a check or a debit card, to satisfy that sweet tooth that I find most families have. That said, so I really support the gentleman's amendment because I think we need to have feedback. And so, however, only 10 of those waivers are in effect with the remainder to begin later this year in 2027, early 2028. This amendment ensures that upon completion of the waivers, Congress receives a robust evaluation of the pilots along with recommendations from the USDA regarding changes to the federal definition of eligible foods, because frankly, that is our job under Article 1 to determine that. And so I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of the gentleman's amendment. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
I have no more.
Gentleman yields.
Yep.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no objection to this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. Question now is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin will be postponed.
It is now in order to consider amendment number 21, printed at Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
I rise as the designee for the gentlewoman from Wyoming, and I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 21, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Grothman of Wisconsin.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer amendment number 21 to the Farm Bill, which would put ranchers with permits to graze on national grasslands in parity with those grazing on other federal lands. Section 402 of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, or FLPMA, authorizes grazing permits for 10 years on National Forest and Bureau of Land Management lands with renewal eligibility subject to continued compliance. Grazing on national grasslands is designated by the Bankhead-Jones Farm Tenant Act and authorized for 10 years, but is not protected and recognized as an official use similar to FLPMA. Ranchers with permits to graze on national grasslands are not guaranteed permit renewals and have experienced unnecessary hurdles with the USDA in obtaining these renewals. When this topic received a legislative hearing, Ty Checketts, the president of the National Association of National Grasslands, spoke to the challenges these ranchers face. He stated the exclusion of national grasslands under FLPMA creates 2 classes of permits, with the grasslands having fewer rights. He testified that the lack of assurance leads to real-world harms, pointing to the loss of AUMs on multiple grasslands across several states. U.S. Forest Service testimony also recognized the disparity of policy for livestock grazing permits and leases between national forest and national grasslands. This amendment is a permanent fix to this issue, providing much-needed certainty and security for ranchers, including the right to 10-year permits, first priority for receipt of new permits, and more. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Hawaii rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this amendment, which would extend automatic grazing renewals to the national grasslands, eliminating environmental review, public participation, and tribal consultation in the management of our public lands. Our national grasslands are extraordinarily precious ecosystems. 62% of similar landscapes have already been lost globally. As stewards of these public lands, we therefore must ensure that they undergo fulsome analysis to prioritize their restoration and long-term conservation. This amendment would allow grazing permits to be renewed indefinitely when agencies fail to complete the NEPA on time. In a time when the Forest Service has lost more than 15% of its staff due to forced retirements and dozing, this is the wrong approach. Though I support responsible grazing of our public lands, this amendment would incentivize the Trump administration to keep cutting staff and degrade these landscapes, which are our national heritage. I must oppose, and Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin.
Pennsylvania.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the gentleman from Wisconsin for offering this amendment. Access to federal lands for grazing is extremely important for supporting producers, particularly in the West. And while the framework for grazing permits on federal lands is provided through the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, the law references lands within national forests rather than the broader national forest system. This amendment is intended to ensure permit renewals for grazing on grasslands is similar to and more consistent with such renewals on other forest lands. It's an efficiency measure as well. So I support this amendment. I urge a yes vote, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Wisconsin.
Mr. Chairman, I urge all members to support Amendment Number 21 to support grazers on our national grasslands. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Hawaii.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 22, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have another amendment at the desk, and this amendment has also been drafted by Representative Hagman.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 22, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Grothman of Wisconsin.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer Amendment 22 to the Farm Bill, which repeals and prohibits future implementation of the Electronic Identification, or EID, ear tag rule. In 2013, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, issued the Animal Disease Traceability Rule, which allowed the use of ear tags, brands, and tattoos for livestock identification in interstate commerce. In November 2024, APHIS amended the ADT rule to mandate EID ear tags for cattle and bison moving interstate despite overwhelming opposition to such efforts. Ranchers and producers are opposed for a multitude of reasons. The rule is the product of a flawed rulemaking. APHIS did not conduct a federalism analysis, even though states have identification regulations and laws. It did not conduct an adequate small business analysis, even though APHIS admitted the rule would burden small operators. And APHIS intentionally undercounted the cost of the rule, basing it just on the cost of the EID tags and not an entire EID system. EID is a government mandate on farmers and ranchers, and one which the Animal Health Protection Act does not authorize APHIS to create or enforce. Because APHIS incorrectly calculated the cost of the rule, it is also an underfunded mandate, and because the demand for EID tags is driven not by actual market demand, but by government mandate, ranchers are facing tag shortages, harming their ability to comply with the rule. If the government cannot provide tags to the regulated community, then this mandate is cost prohibitive for producers, which jeopardizes their future operations and risks additional vertical integration in the increasingly consolidated food supply chain. This government mandate also raises privacy concerns for ranchers and their herds based on information collected through the EID system, concerns which APHIS never adequately addressed in the rule. And the rule's application to bison also disadvantages tribal bison ranchers who manage bison as wildlife, not livestock. Because of all these issues, it's nearly 2 years later and ranchers are still facing EID tag shortages, and the cost of EID tags on the private market increased because of the fallout. All this harm for regulation that's not needed, as the U.S. already had a well-functioning animal disease traceability system, and APHIS even conceded in the rulemaking that foreign animal disease had largely been excluded from the country. Ranchers and farmers should be allowed to adopt the best practices for their business and herds voluntarily when it makes sense for them, not at the behest of a federal agency. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Animal disease traceability is an extremely important aspect of protecting our domestic livestock herds and our foreign trade markets. We have already seen the importance of animal disease traceability and EID tags with dairy cattle due to the ongoing outbreak of the highly pathogenic avian influenza. USDA helps producers comply with this rule by providing the tags at no cost to producers, and the rule this amendment seeks to repeal has been in effect for more than 18 months already with no negative consequences. Producers recognize that animal disease traceability is an essential component of protecting livestock during an animal disease outbreak. We cannot allow ourselves to be in a position where efforts to improve animal disease traceability are hampered. And for this reason, I must respectfully oppose the gentlelady from Wyoming's amendment offered by my good friend from Wisconsin, and I urge my colleagues to do the same, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin.
I urge all my colleagues to support the amendment number 22 and finally end the EID ear tag mandate on Americans ranchers, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I yield to the gentlewoman from Hawaii, the ranking member of the Conservation Research and Biotechnology Subcommittee, Ms. Takuda, for 1.5 minutes.
Gentleman from Hawaii is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this amendment, which would send us backwards when it comes to animal disease tracing and herd management. Electronic ear tags for cattle and bison reduce human error and empower veterinarians and animal health experts from APHIS to track potential outbreaks. The American Veterinary Medicine Association has prioritized the implementation of unique identification of animals and premises, which is essential for tracing origin and destination of all livestock, and in particular food-producing animals, in order to protect the nation's livestock industry and public health. That's why the electronic ear tag proposal was supported by National Milk Producers Federation, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and the American Veterinary Medicine Association. The USDA has provided free tags to producers to combat any economic burden while enabling the fastest possible response to animal disease. At a time when highly pathogenic avian influenza has been proven to affect additional species and New World screwworm is again threatening American cattle herds, we should not take tools out of the USDA's toolbox to prevent the spread of disease. I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose this measure. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Well, I couldn't agree with the gentlelady more. You know, we've seen significant examples of how important these EID tags have been in tracking the highly pathogenic avian influenza as it's gotten into our dairy cows in different parts of the country. And she referenced the New World screwworm. That is a huge threat to the United States. Thankfully, so far we've successfully avoided that with the building of the different production facilities for sterile flies, which is really the proven solution or the remedy to that. Well, but being able to track the cattle, and so once again, you know, we cannot hamper our ability to improve animal disease traceability. And so with the greatest respect to the gentlelady who was the author of this amendment, I just encourage all members to oppose it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
I'll ask for a roll call.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 24, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise as a designee for the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan, and I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 24, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Craig of Minnesota.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Craig, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. The Biorefinery Renewable Chemical and Bio-Based Product Manufacturing Assistance Program is a popular and successful program at USDA to support new and emerging technologies for bio-based products. This means innovation here at home, and it means opening up new markets to our farmers. I thank my colleague for bringing this amendment forward to provide higher loan guarantees for this program to support a wider variety of projects. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania. For what purpose does he seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition, although I do not object to the amendment.
Objection. The gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank the gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, excuse me, for her amendment, and for the ranking member representing her this evening. This amendment would increase the loan guarantee cap for the Biorefinery Renewable Chemical and Bio-Based Product Manufacturing Assistance Program to $400 million. This mandatory funded program, last funded in 2020, has a large unobligated balance, and raising the loan caps will ensure needed projects get funded. Amendments like these improve, bipartisan amendment like these continue to improve the Bipartisan Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman.
Speaker, I urge all members to support the amendment, and I yield the balance of my time.
All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Minnesota. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 26, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 26, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Latta of Ohio.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman
Thank
from
you,
Ohio.
Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of my amendment, which I am pleased to lead with the gentlelady from Illinois' 2nd District. For years, large parts of my district and rural areas across America have lacked access to fast broadband connections. Reliable internet access is more than just being able to stream your favorite TV shows and movies. It's the crucial link that connects us all. Our people, nation, and economy run on reliable internet connections. Agricultural producers in Ohio and across America also know that reliable broadband connections are essential to their operations. After all, it helps deploy technologies that increase their productivity, produces higher yields, and minimizes operating costs. Today's smart agriculture technology, from autonomous tractors and distributed soil sensors, rely on internet connections to share data. In fact, our ag producers use information in real time to make smarter decisions on how to optimize inputs and whether and when to plant or harvest. And when terrestrial or cellular networks are not available, satellite broadband steps in to make these technologies work. However, it's not just advanced satellite broadband capabilities that improve precision agriculture. Earth imaging satellites also provide important information that help farmers and ranchers identify visual trends that may require immediate attention. In order to ensure our regulations maximize those opportunities, our amendment would require the FCC to review its current satellite rules to determine if rule changes can be made to promote precision agriculture. I'm committed to ensuring our agricultural producers have the tools at their disposal to help them to increase productivity while minimizing costs. This amendment is an excellent step forward in that mission. Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I raise and claim time in opposition, but I'm not opposed to the amendment itself, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
I want to thank my colleague for bringing up this amendment. The bill this amendment is based on has already passed the House by voice vote and now sits idly in the Senate. I'm glad my colleagues are paying attention to this issue and supportive of promoting precision agriculture for our farmers. I support adoption of this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves.
Well, thank you very much,
Gentleman.
Mr. Chairman. I have nothing further, and if you'd like to close.
Gentlelady from Maine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge all members to support this amendment, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and the overall bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio. Those in favor will say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 27, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. Here. It is now in order to consider amendment number 28, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 28, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mrs. Luna of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Luna, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this amendment. As you know, I never thought I'd have to be debating liability protections for pesticide companies, yet here I am today. And I'd like to share some stats with you. A major study found that pesticide mixtures increase childhood leukemia by 23%, brain cancer by 36%, and overall childhood cancer by 30%. We find that a majority of Americans, specifically that do rely on SNAP and EBT, are being fed massively processed foods that are increasing their cancer risks, not to mention, as a whole, I think that this is something that we should all get behind and that we do not want to ever provide or be on the side of cancer-causing anything. Research shows that maternal exposures to pesticides at home or at work is linked to a higher risk of leukemia in children. These chemicals are known to cross the placenta and impact fetal development. In addition to that, a review of over 174 studies from 2013 to 2023 found constant and consistent links between pesticide exposures and leukemia, brain cancers, rare childhood cancers. Off record, I had a conversation in the cloakroom from a young member of Congress who was just elected in Georgia, who said that he suffered from thyroid cancer and it was known, or that he thought it was due to an environmental factor. The point is that this should not be partisan. It's about the American people and protecting them. Now, I understand that this place can get pretty heated sometimes, but I was also called a damn liar for defending my position, which is far from the truth. The fact is that I'm not getting paid special interest money. I'm trying to fight for my district and I think for the well-being of a majority of Americans. The fact is that there's far too much special money and interest going into policies like these. And so while people claim that they're in opposition, if you pull FEC reportings and reports of which we do have screenshots of all of that, it says quite the otherwise. I would like to, ma'am, if you'd like to speak, yield as much time as you would like to speak in support of this.
Gentleman from Maine.
Thank you very much. I thank the gentlelady for both presenting this amendment, which I also supported, and speaking in favor of it. Pesticide preemption has received an extraordinary amount of attention in the past year, as is appropriate when the federal government considers overriding states' rights. Litigation on this topic was discussed at the Supreme Court on Monday. A dominant pesticide manufacturer just announced a possible settlement of $7.25 billion, and President Trump has invoked national security powers to mandate the protection of glyphosate. There is opposition to federal preemption of state liability laws on both sides of the aisle. Yet the Republican majority insisted at every turn on including these provisions in what should be a bipartisan farm bill that delivers for farmers and families. This amendment is not extreme. It would not ban pesticides or require any additional regulatory burden on the manufacturers. Quite literally, it would preserve the status quo and allow the Supreme Court to examine this issue separately and the complicated legal issues at its core. The question of federal preemption also sits next to a truly poisonous provision that would waive all other laws for registered pesticides, including the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act. Registration under EPA's pesticide process provides instructions for use, but does not include any requirements to guard against contamination of our air and water supply. Let's be clear. The Clean Water Act already includes a broad exemption for agricultural storm water runoff because Congress knew at some point about pesticide runoff was inevitable. However, the EPA is obligated to separately permit intentional uses of pesticides that enter our waterways, as the Sixth Circuit decided in 2009. It's astonishing to me that my Republican colleagues wrote this bill to abolish that protection for rural communities and water supplies. I want to acknowledge the bipartisan effort by members in Congress and invested citizens on the outside whose relentless efforts are why this amendment was even allowed to be debated today. I thank you, Representative Luna, for your tireless efforts on this front, and I hope my colleagues will heed your example and vote for this amendment. Madam Speaker, I urge all members to support this, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields
I
back.
reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia
Speaker, I
seek
rise in
recognition?
opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as we listen to this debate, and no doubt as text messages and other things have been sent out about this piece of legislation, what I want the Mayhaw Amendment to know is that this has nothing to do with the actual pesticide in the jug. Absolutely nothing. This is uniformity of pesticide labeling requirements. And so there are people out there that want to raise the cost on farmers by requiring that Florida would have one set of labels, Georgia would have another. And we're simply saying that when the EPA says this is the appropriate label and the proper label to put the warnings on the chemical, that is going to be uniform throughout the states. Others want to go so far as to allow every individual city or municipality to come up with their own labeling requirement. That's simply not feasible from the standpoint of the companies and actually getting a product to the consumer like I just bought to kill the fire ants in my yard. By the way, the states, even with our amendment, maintain the ability to restrict the chemical from being used in their state. So again, Mr. Speaker, I just want the people to know, especially the Mayhaw people that have been texting and calling about the misrepresentation of this amendment. It has absolutely nothing to do with the pesticide in the jug. It is uniformity of pesticide labeling that they are trying to take away with this amendment. So I represent Georgia. We're close to the Florida line. If the EPA says the label is good, I don't see why every state municipality should have to have another label that would simply raise the price for the American consumer. And again, we're not talking about the pesticide in the jug, as has been misrepresented to the American citizens and especially the Mayhaw movement. We're talking about just the label on the jug. There is no liability shield for the pesticide in the jug. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
Speaker, how much time do I have?
Gentlewoman has 30 seconds.
I'd like to clarify that Section 10205 blocks states and local governments from requiring any warnings beyond what the EPA provides. As far as I'm concerned, if someone's trying to give something to my kid that causes cancer, I would hope to heck that Congress would block that. And I'll end by saying I take zero money from pesticide liability in manufacturers, and my colleague takes $124,000 from them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield my time.
One yields back. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, again, this is uniformity of pesticide labeling. It has nothing to do with the actual chemical or the pesticide in the jug. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time to the chairman of the committee, G.T. Thompson.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you. I inquire how much time is left?
Much time? Gentleman has 2¼ minutes remaining.
Okay, very good. Well, I find it sad that we enter into cheap shots regarding organizations that when they see something that you're working hard on behalf of the American farmer and they want to make a legal, ethical donation, that they can do that. It tells me that the arguments on the other side are pretty shallow and they're emotional. They're not science-based. The sections that this amendment seeks to strike deliver common sense regulatory reforms that are critical for securing access to well-regulated pesticide tools for a variety of crop production and public health needs. The language also reflects thoughtful changes to address stakeholder concerns, such as making sure it is crystal clear that the EPA can still respond quickly to new scientific findings and that existing state authorities are maintained. The bill in front of us today reaffirms existing statutes that the EPA is the authoritative voice for making safety findings related to pesticides communicated through legal binding labels while retaining states' authority for the sale, use, and distribution of crop protections. I don't know if Maine and Florida have toxicologists on staff. I would tell you I'm absolutely confident that less than half of the states have the qualified individuals in order to put forward labeling. The gentleman from Georgia is right. This is about a labeling bill and making sure that and by the way, the states can weigh in with the EPA. They just have to go through the EPA if they have special circumstances for labeling. But the bill in front of us today reaffirms existing statute that the EPA is that this includes protecting states' ability to not register a product at all within the jurisdiction, regulatory certainty, and making sure that there's clear science-based regulatory system that is rooted in scientific review from the EPA, not courtroom science that overrides federal findings is what producers need. And frankly, it's disappointing that this body has to revisit and clarify existing statute to reaffirm that state labeling laws, such as California's Proposition 65, which has already been found to be in violation of the Constitution when applied to products containing glyphosate, are not allowed under the existing law because trial lawyers have scrambled to find every possible loophole in federal law. Additionally, this package also provides states who have a formal relationship with the EPA as co-regulators on pesticide products with clarity that that they're able to submit.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I encourage the defeat of this amendment, and I thank the gentleman from Georgia for managing
All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
I request yeas and nays.
The gentlewoman requests a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Florida will be postponed. Now in order to consider amendment number 29, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 29, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Mace of South Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from South Carolina, Ms. Mace, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you visit South Carolina's low country, you'll understand commercial shrimping and fishing are not just the backbone of our coastal communities, but a part of our heritage and our way of life. You'll find shrimp festivals, oyster roasts, and low country boils nearly every weekend during the season. In communities across South Carolina's 1st Congressional District, from McCollumville to Mount Pleasant to Beaufort to Bluffton to Hilton Head and Hilton Head Island, you'll see thousands show up to bless the fleet of shrimp boats when they head out to begin their seasons. Across the state of South Carolina, you see communities, neighbors, and families come together around local caught seafood and see people come from thousands of miles away just to taste it. But talk to any shrimper or fisherman in this country, and you'll know the commercial fishing and shrimping industries are struggling. For too long, the USDA has ignored our shrimpers and our fishermen, the farmers of the sea, who put nutritious, fresh seafood on our tables at dinner. President Trump understands food security as national security and has recognized the importance of revitalizing our domestic seafood industry. Last April, he issued an executive order entitled Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness. Last fall, we saw the USDA establish a new seafood liaison in the Secretary's office to ensure the voices of our seafood harvesters are heard. Just a few weeks ago, Secretary Rollins announced the creation of the first ever Office of Seafood within the Department of Agriculture. This gives our shrimpers and our fishermen a seat at the table. Our amendment would codify the newly established Office of Seafood at the USDA, ensuring our commercial shrimpers and fishermen, as well as our fish processors, are integrated into USDA programs. The Office of Seafood would also be responsible for working alongside the Department of Commerce, U.S. Trade Representative, NOAA, and other federal agencies and departments to revitalize the American seafood industry. The hardworking South Carolinians who work our waters and put fresh local seafood on our plates deserve this. This amendment would deliver it. I will always stand with South Carolina shrimpers and fishermen, and I urge all members to support our domestic seafood industry by voting in favor of this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise and claim time in opposition, but I am not opposed to the amendment itself, and I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
I want to thank the gentlewoman from South Carolina for introducing this amendment and wholeheartedly support it. An Office of Seafood will be an important resource for coordination across the aquaculture sector. I am fortunate enough to represent the state of Maine, so fishermen are an important part of our economy, our culture, and the communities that we all live in. I'm lucky enough to live in the heart of lobster harvesting territory, so I know firsthand how important the fisheries is to our state and to all of you who hopefully come to visit our state and enjoy our delicious seafood. I've been listening to GT throughout the night talk about how he did a lot of listening tours and traveled around the country, and I was very privileged to have him come and visit in the state of Maine. And while he was there, we made sure that even though it was an agriculture listening tour, that because the Office of Aquaculture is an important part of the USDA, that we ensured that he got to visit an oyster farmer, that he ate some of our delicious seafood that included scallops, oysters, maybe a little bit of lobster, and I think even a bit of seaweed he managed to choke down, and we were appreciative of him trying all of the many seafood in our state. I've always been surprised as a member of the Agriculture Committee and getting to know the USDA, knowing that aquaculture resides there. There are fisheries issues that come up there, and fishermen often don't get the same opportunity to utilize the resources as farmers do. We all in this country understand the important role that farmers play in producing American food, and we appreciate them so much, but sometimes we forget that fishermen need to have access to many of the same resources. Fish is an important part of our diet. We should eat more of it, and we should certainly eat more domestically produced and harvested seafood. So I think this office will go a long way to provide our fishermen with a central source of outreach and information that focuses on the seafood industry. This amendment codifying the office will give the security needed to create working relationships within the USDA and across the seafood sector. I've heard from many people in the seafood industry and the fishermen ever since this was originally announced by the USDA and Secretary Rollins, encouraging me to support this, to do anything I could to make sure that this was a stable entity within the USDA. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this amendment and talk about the importance of making sure it's permanent and their fishermen continue to have this access. I support this amendment to create this additional office, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina.
I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Chairman Thompson.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank the gentlelady. And I thank my good friend from Maine who has the best tasting kelp I've ever had. It was delicious, along with everything else. I was happy to see USDA establish the new Office of Seafood this month to better support and serve our seafood industry, helping to enable the administration's America First Seafood strategy. American seafood is a vital part of the U.S. food supply. I think it's a vital part of American agriculture. And codifying this office will ensure that this support continues for years to come by providing dedicated resources, time, and coordination for the industry. And I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from South Carolina.
I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maine.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to support this amendment, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from South Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 30, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 30, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-268, offered by Ms. Mace of South Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from South Carolina, Ms. Mace, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An onslaught of substandard foreign seafood, often subsidized by foreign governments or international financial institutions, is being dumped into our markets, devastating our domestic seafood industry. For example, after hearing the testimony of some of my constituents, the U.S. International Trade Commission has determined in Ecuador, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam were illegally subsidized and dumping shrimp, imposing anti-dumping and countervailing duties. This foreign seafood is often caught through illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and employ brutal working conditions, including the use of child or forced labor. These foreign actors also don't abide by the same stringent food safety standards we have in our country, using banned antibiotics and other chemicals in their seafood. Just last year, there was a recall of foreign shrimp from Indonesia, which was contaminated with cesium-137. The foreign shrimp was literally radioactive. Imagine all the contaminated foreign seafood that slips into our food supply undetected. This has all combined to push down dock prices for our domestic shrimpers and fishermen. In some parts of the country, dock prices for shrimp fell to around $1 per pound in recent years. This, coupled with the inflation we experienced under the previous administration and elevated fuel costs, is causing the perfect storm. Facing anti-competitive foreign practices, falling dock prices, and economic headwinds, fishermen and shrimpers are struggling not just to earn a living, but to even make it to the next season. To illustrate the scope and scale of this problem, total value of U.S. commercial seafood landings has fallen 25% from 2021 to 2024 in just 3 years. Landings by weight have fallen to their lowest level since 1988. At the same time, our food supply has become increasingly dependent on foreign seafood. Today, foreign imports account for approximately 94% of total seafood consumption in America. This is exactly why I'm offering this amendment today. Our shrimpers and fishermen put food on the table. They are the farmers of the sea, and it's past time we started treating them like it. The USDA has a variety of programs to provide assistance to farmers and ranchers, and it's time we allowed our commercial fishermen to take part in them. This amendment would amend the Consolidated Farm and Rural Development Act to include commercial fishing and fish processing as eligible agricultural activities for USDA programs, unlocking access to many grant, loan, and assistance programs for our shrimpers and fishermen. This amendment would also ensure commercial fishermen and fish processors have access to USDA farm ownership loans and farm operating loans. And best of all, according to the Congressional Budget Office, this amendment is budget neutral. This is a common sense way to support the shrimpers and fishermen who feed our families and make South Carolina's Lowcountry and so many places across our nation's coast very special. I would like to thank Representative Carbajal for partnering with me on this amendment and urge all members to support this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, USDA loan programs have helped thousands of farmers and ranchers access the capital they need to feed people throughout the nation and beyond. Opening up these critical loan programs to the vague and broadly defined fish processing businesses in this amendment could lead to unintended consequences. By their definition, a food manufacturer that processes fish sticks, and 100 other non-seafood products would qualify for a USDA direct farm operating loan, even if they are thousands of miles from the nearest seafood source. I encourage the sponsors of this amendment to seek technical assistance to close these giant loopholes, and I urge my colleagues to vote no on this flawed amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentlewoman from South Carolina.
I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Chairman Thompson.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For many of our nation's coastal areas, fishermen represent not just a way to make a living, but they are the embodiment of the community's culture. Through commercial fishermen, although commercial fishermen catch 8.4 billion pounds of seafood each year, they do not qualify for the same access to credit as many of our nation's other food producers do to their unique business structure. Adopting this amendment is one of the many actions that we can take to expand access to credit for these vital businesses that serve as the lifeblood of their coastal communities, and our ag lenders are already uniquely suited to provide this capital. That being said, I strongly encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from South Carolina.
I will yield.
Gentleman from South Carolina yields back. Gentleman from Minnesota.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to oppose the amendment, and I yield back.
All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from South Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 31, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 31, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Mace of South Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from South Carolina, Ms. Mace, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from South Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Since I came to Congress, I've been fighting to end and put an end to taxpayer-funded animal cruelty. We've seen great successes, including successfully eliminating these painful and inhumane animal experiments across the VA, Department of War, and more. Today, we seek to build on the significant progress with this amendment. Based on our bipartisan bill, Violet's Law, which we named after a hound dog which was rescued from a government lab, our amendment would ensure the humane treatment of lab animals once they are retired. Each year, thousands of animals like Violet are used in federal labs, many of them in non-invasive and non-terminal testing. Too often, when that research ends, these animals, despite being healthy, are killed simply because there is no policy in place to retire them. Our amendment fixes that. Rather than being euthanized, my amendment would ensure federal research facilities establish procedures to facilitate the adoption or non-laboratory placement of dogs, cats, non-human primates, guinea pigs, hamsters, and rabbits used in government labs. It would allow agencies to place these precious animals with animal rescue organizations, animal sanctuaries, and animal shelters to facilitate finding their new home or with an individual looking to adopt the animal. This is a common sense idea which is already working. We've already seen some federal agencies adopt policies allowing lab animals to be retired and rehomed. Many states have adopted similar laws. This idea is supported not just by animal welfare advocates, but by leaders in the biomedical research community as well. We can judge a man and a country by its treatment of animals, and our country can do so much better than euthanizing healthy, innocent, animals created by God. I would like to thank Representative Titus for partnering with me on this amendment and urge all members to support this amendment. Together we can save the lives of countless innocent dogs, cats, guinea pigs, hamsters, and rabbits. I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise and claim the time in opposition, but I am not opposed to the amendment itself, and I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment to add violence law to the Farm Bill. The amendment would allow for the adoption or placement in another home for animals once they are no longer needed for research in federal labs. Several other federal government departments, including NIH, DOD, and the FDA, allow for the retirement of lab animals, but the USDA has been slow to follow. This amendment would make sure that these animals who have contributed so much of their lives to advancing the cause of science would be able to live out the rest of their lives in a loving home or sanctuary. I'd like to thank Ms. Mace for her amendment, and I'd like to urge a yes vote. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentlewoman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would encourage my colleagues to support the amendment and vote for its passage, and I yield.
Gentlewoman yields back. Gentlewoman from Minnesota.
Ditto, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from South Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The chair understands amendment number 33 will not be offered. It is now in order to consider amendment number 36, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 36, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Moore of West Virginia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Moore, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment that, in my view, would correct what had taken place in the Agriculture Committee. So there's an amendment to eliminate dog racing, greyhound racing specifically, in the United States. The only problem with that, there's only one state that continues to do that, and that is the state of West Virginia. One of the issues surrounding this is the revenue that is generated from that track. 40% of the revenue sharing from the track supports the pension funds of police and firefighters. And we've had the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Association of Firefighters actually come out in support of this amendment because it will decimate those pensions of our retired police and firefighters, some of which are disabled. And so those union members who are just trying to scratch by in the state of West Virginia are no longer going to be able to do that. This amendment leaves the full ban in place for the other 49 states, grandfathers in the 2 tracks that are in West Virginia. No new tracks can open in West Virginia or any state in the country after this. And lastly, this really is a question of states' rights, where we have voted on this in the state of West Virginia. They've affirmatively voted on it. And this question will come up again before the state legislature. Perhaps they'll vote at some point not to, but we're really worried about not only those pensions, but the almost 2,000 employees that are also involved in this industry. I reserve the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise and claim time in opposition to Amendment 36.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, greyhound racing is cruel and inhumane, resulting in hundreds of injuries and death of otherwise healthy dogs. It is already prohibited in 44 states and only exists in 1, West Virginia. Despite existing only in West Virginia, federal legislation to end greyhound racing is necessary because Greyhound races are still transmitted to bettors across the United States, and bets placed on these simulcast races prop up this cruel but dying industry, both in the United States and abroad. The Bipartisan Greyhound Protection Act, did I say bipartisan, has been a legislative concept since 2020, building off of the work of former Representative Tony Cardenas and now United Nations Ambassador Mike Waltz. I have been the lead sponsor of this bipartisan legislation for the past 4 years, alongside my colleagues, Randy Fine, Zach Nunn, and Don Davis. During these 6 years, the Greyhound Protection Act has earned dozens of Democrat and Republican co-sponsors. It is endorsed by over 250 animal protection groups, local humane societies, and community leaders. In March, the bipartisan Greyhound Protection Act passed the House Agriculture Committee by voice vote during the Farm Bill's committee markup. Since that time, a final Greyhound protection language in the bill has been modified to ensure it applies to greyhounds and nothing else. That change to protect sportsmen and hunting dogs was something Representative Nunn and I recognized and expressed our willingness to the Ag Committee on amending this language. It represents a diligently crafted compromise between animal protection groups and hunters, exactly the type of bipartisanship we come to expect from a farm bill. If this amendment were to pass, it would effectively gut the Greyhound Protection Act and give a free pass for greyhound racing to continue to operate in one state in the United States. My door has been open for years to discuss this language, and I know the Agriculture Committee's doors were open all this time as well. While I understand the concerns surrounding the impact on a very small group of individuals, no pension solvency should hinge on a single volatile revenue stream, particularly one tied to an inhumane industry in long-term decline. I have served in local government myself, and I know that states routinely adjust revenue frameworks when passing out activities deemed inconsistent with public values or policy priorities. West Virginia already has an alternative gaming revenues, including lottery and casino operations, that can be recalibrated if needed. This amendment runs counter to public sentiment and ensures more greyhounds will not continue to live lives of confinement in stacked metal cages and be subjected to predictable and preventable risk of injury and death on the track. It has taken decades of work by greyhound rescuers to reach this point, and as well as the work done by myself, my colleagues, and committee staff over the last number of years. I ask that you please oppose this amendment and end the cycle of government-mandated cruelty. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from West Virginia.
It's time to have, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me.
Time.
3 minutes remain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quickly is, it's kind of like a sick obsession of this town to just want to control and destroy jobs in one of the poorest states in America. It really is. And I will just note that this is destroying guys who have union pensions. It is against the unions to vote for this bill, to vote against this amendment. It is against the unions. You're hurting their membership. And with that, I would like to yield time to the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman for introducing this amendment. I did not support the amendment that passed out of committee by voice banning greyhound racing nationwide. I think the ban is heavy-handed. It sets a dangerous precedent, and it doesn't take into consideration the tracks that are currently in operation, which basically is just 2 in West Virginia. There are only 2 greyhound racetracks left in the country, both of which are located in West Virginia, one of the tracks being located in Mr. Moore's district. Mr. Moore's amendment strikes a fair compromise by maintaining the ban on any future operations outside of West Virginia while preserving the tracks and associated jobs that already exist. And I urge my colleagues to join me in voting in favor of the amendment.
Gentleman
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from West Virginia.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chair, I support unions, but this is about cruelty to animals. And we are trying to justify one good over a lot of evil. And it is important that we not use this issue and call it just jobs for a very, very small amount of individuals, one state in our nation, when it comes to really protecting humane approaches to how we deal with greyhounds and animals. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is in support of the unions, those union members. You vote against this, you're against the unions. That's a fact. You are trying to take their pensions away from them. That is what you're doing. Ask the Fraternal Order of Police, ask the firefighters union, go ask them about that, and they will give you an answer. That is exactly what's going on here. I'm standing up for those members, standing up for the individuals that are supported by this track. And look, maybe someday the state of West Virginia is actually going to, maybe they'll vote to get rid of it. But that's up to the state of West Virginia. As we've just heard from the gentleman, over 40 states have voted to end dog racing, and that is their right to do that. But this obsession with the state of West Virginia, less than 2 million people, and what we're doing inside of our borders, I don't really get. But just to be clear, this bill right here is in support of the police. This amendment is in support of the police. It's in support of the firefighters. You're taking away their pensions if you don't support the amendment. And I think it's a pretty fair compromise, as the chairman said. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
You know, in this country, we've done a lot of inhumane things, whether it's animals or people. And we oftentimes try to justify it in one way or another. But it's hard to justify jobs over being humane. It's a matter of values. And that's really what it's about. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
Time has expired. All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from West Virginia. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Gentleman from California.
I would request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from West Virginia will be postponed. To consider amendment number 38, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
As the designee for the gentleman from Colorado, and I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 38, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mrs. Skolton of Michigan.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Skolton, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to you all for being here burning the midnight oil with us. This amendment would make it easier to carry out emergency watershed protection measures after a disaster. The Western United States is experiencing record-setting drought and high temperatures even in the winter months, exponentially increasing wildfire risk. Wildfires do not end when the fire does. They have significant impacts on our watersheds, and emergency measures are often needed to clear out debris and protect water supplies in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. This amendment would add the text of Mr. Negus's bipartisan bicameral bill, the Making Access to Cleanup Happen, or Match It Act, which would require the U.S. Department of Agriculture to develop a list of approved watershed protection measures that local governments and tribes can undertake in an emergency, and establish an approval process for additional post-fire actions that might be needed. This measure would remove burdensome red tape and allow for expedited emergency response after a wildfire. In the face of what is likely to be a devastating wildfire year, it's important that we equip our communities with all the tools they need to respond as quickly and efficiently as possible. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and join me in taking action to protect our communities after disaster. That I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
I rise in opposition of the amendment, although I'm not opposed to the amendment.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the gentlelady for offering this amendment on behalf of the gentleman from Colorado. The Emergency Watershed Protection Program offers financial and technical assistance to eligible participants for watershed impairments after flooding, fires, or other natural disasters. This program is important for addressing such urgent threats, including the removal of debris from stream channels, road culverts, and bridges, protecting stream banks, establishing vegetative cover on eroding lands, and repairing some conservation practices. This amendment would help encourage quicker response by ensuring that partner costs can be considered as part of the match if incurred prior to entering into an agreement. So I support the amendment and urge a yes vote, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle can support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Michigan. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 39, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise as the designee from the gentleman from Colorado, and I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 39, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Skolton of Michigan.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Skolton, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this, I ask unanimous consent to modify the amendment by the form that I've placed at the desk.
Clerk will report the modification.
Modification to amendment number 39, offered by Ms. Skolton of Michigan. Strike page 430 each time it appears and insert page 431.
Objection. The amendment is modified. Gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment would expand federal support for sustainable agriculture and innovative sustainability solutions through the AGARDA program. AGARDA helps to find cutting-edge solutions to food, agriculture, and environmental challenges. This amendment will build upon the already proven success of this program by expanding its research to include innovative sustainability solutions. This amendment will give our agricultural producers the tools they need to increase sustainable and efficient use of water, soil, and other natural resources, and will help farms adapt to challenges like extreme weather events and drought. This effort is bipartisan, done in partnership with Rep. Flood, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. With that, I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition of the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank my colleagues for their interest in a program with tremendous potential to deliver solutions for our nation's producers. The Agriculture Advanced Research and Development Authority Program, also known as AGARDA. Modeled off of similar programs in the defense and energy sectors, AGARDA is focused on filling high-risk areas where there is high payoff potential, but the private sector is unlikely to undertake research alone. While I appreciate the interest in strengthening this program, promoting climate solutions does not fit into the underlying mission of AgARDA and takes away from its mission. We see substantial investment from the private sector and miscellaneous non-government organizations on this topic, and it would be inappropriate to add to this program when these activities are already well funded. So for this reason, I will not be supporting this amendment's inclusion, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle nonetheless will support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. All time is yielded back. The question is on the amendment as modified, offered by the gentlewoman from Michigan. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment as modified is not agreed to.
Vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Michigan will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 41, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 42, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Guam seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise as designee and co-lead for Representative Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 42, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Moylan of Guam.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Guam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Aquaculture has the potential to transform island economics and nutrition. By encouraging small-scale and commercial agriculture, Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands could lower the cost of fresh, nutritional food, increase food self-sustainability, and drive down reliance on foreign imports. This amendment simply directs USDA to consult with Guam and U.S. Virgin Island agencies to identify locations in the islands, our islands, that are suitable for the development of aquaculture small businesses, including water quality assessments, coastal access, infrastructure needs, and applicable environmental and regulatory requirements. This study is the foundation to developing a sustainable aquaculture sectors, and I urge my colleagues to support the territorial aquaculture and vote yes on this bipartisan amendment. I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise and claim time in opposition, but I'm not opposed to the amendment itself, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I support this amendment. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield my time.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Guam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate my colleagues' support. I look forward to moving this measure forward. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Guam. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the aye has it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 45, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 45, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Skolton of Michigan.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Skolton, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you. I rise today in support of this amendment, which would incorporate the text of my bill, the Bipartisan, Bicameral Promoting Access to Local Agriculture Act, into the Farm Bill. Too often, local farmers and ranchers struggle to accept benefits through critical federal nutrition programs designed to feed communities like SNAP and WIC. This is not because of a lack of need or demand, but rather because the system itself is too complicated to navigate. Now, I fully believe in cutting this red tape to connect more communities to the healthy food that they need. In a state like Michigan, where we grow more than 300 commodities, it makes us one of the most agriculturally diverse states in the country. Bureaucratic roadblocks mean less businesses for hardworking farmers and less fresh food on the table for families. I deeply believe that food is medicine, and this is an agricultural issue, it's a food supply issue, but it's also a matter of health. This provision would cut red tape to make it easier for farmers to participate in these essential programs, while also ensuring that families have better access to fresh, healthy, and affordable food. This bipartisan, bicameral effort is about making the government work the way that it should and advancing practical solutions that are responsive to the farmers and the families that we serve. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and join me in taking action to protect our communities in this time of need. With that, I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to the amendment, although I'm supportive of the amendment.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank the gentlelady for bringing forward this amendment. This is a win-win for agriculture and for our neighbors in need. By streamlining applications for nutrition programs redeemed at farmers markets and stands, this amendment will remove bureaucratic red tape and expand markets for our farmers and ranchers while increasing access to fresh, locally grown food for lower-income families. And I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you. I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle can support this important amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Michigan. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 46, printed in Part B of House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 46, printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Ms. Schreier of Washington.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Schreier, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my amendment to the Farm, Food, and National Security Act that would codify the State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement, or SAFE initiative. The SAFE initiative was established in 2007 as part of the Conservation Reserve Program. It helps landowners restore land that would otherwise be unproductive for agricultural purposes. The initiative is unique in that it specifically supports wildlife populations by restoring critical habitats and providing food sources. This is great for agricultural producers, a win for wildlife and the environment, and it allows states to work toward their high-priority conservation goals. For example, in parts of Washington state, land enrolled in the SAFE initiative can provide habitat for 2 of our native birds, the sage grouse and the core sharp-tailed grouse. There are fewer than 1,000 of these birds remaining, and a lot of their habitat is on private farms across our state. This program protects those species. In other areas of the country, the program can be used to protect habitats for species like the New England cottontail, grassland birds, deer, and even pollinators. This program is entirely voluntary and gives farmers an opportunity to earn money through land that they no longer can use or they may not need. I've heard from farmers who are thrilled to have this opportunity to restore their land, which of course benefits them financially, but also protects habitat, improves soil health, limits erosion, and sequesters carbon. Instead of producing lower and lower yields or being forced to sell their land, farmers can receive annual rental payments and additional financial assistance to establish long-term, easy-to-implement conservation practices like increasing vegetative cover. This program is a common-sense solution that gives farmers an opportunity to diversify their income while ensuring their land can be used by future generations. It's great for the environment, it's phenomenal for our nation's farmers, and it creates lasting state partnerships with producers. It's past time for this initiative to be signed into law, and I urge my colleagues to support my amendment that would codify the SAFE initiative and ensure land can be continuously enrolled in this program. I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment, although I don't oppose this amendment.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentlelady for offering this amendment. Our system of voluntary, incentive-based, and locally led conservation is a proven model, providing benefits to both producer and the environment. Conservation programs also provide important benefits for wildlife habitat, as we see in case of SAFE and other programs like the Voluntary Public Access Habitat Incentive Program. Since acres is typically enrolled in SAFE through the continuous enrollment option, this amendment would simply codify that. As such, I support the amendment and I urge a yes vote, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I encourage my colleagues to vote to codify this SAFE initiative program, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Washington. Those in favor will say aye. And opposed, those will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 47, printed at Part B in House Report 119-628. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Printed in Part B of House Report number 119-628, offered by Mr. Self of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
I yield as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer an amendment to ensure that a program called Nutrition Assistance actually delivers nutrition. Today, SNAP is funding billions of dollars in purchases of sugary soda, products with zero nutritional value and well-documented links to obesity, diabetes, and long-term health costs. That is not what this program was designed to do. My amendment is straightforward. It adds soda to the list of ineligible SNAP items alongside alcohol and tobacco, and defines soda clearly as any carbonated beverage containing more than 1 gram of added sugar, artificial sweetener, or flavoring per serving. Now let's address the obvious concern: choice. SNAP participants already use multiple forms of payment at checkout. This amendment does not take away anyone's ability to purchase soda. They remain fully free to do so with cash, credit, or debit. What this does is ensure that taxpayer-funded nutrition dollars are not used for products with zero nutritional value. We already do this in WIC. We already do this with alcohol and tobacco. The authority exists, the precedent exists. At a time when taxpayers are funding both the purchase of these products and the health care costs that follow, we should at least stop financing the problem on the front end. This is a narrow, common sense reform that restores integrity to SNAP and aligns it with its core mission. I urge adoption of the amendment, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for this amendment, and of course, all of us here support promoting healthier diets and lifestyles for all Americans, but I have serious concerns with any policy that would make life more difficult for Americans who are already struggling to make ends meet. Across the country right now, chaotic waivers restricting different kinds of foods and drinks from being purchased with SNAP are already creating massive confusion for participants and for retailers. We don't know the result of the effectiveness of these waivers at this point, although things aren't looking good. And we certainly shouldn't be codifying any type of restrictions and picking winners and losers among foods without getting those results first. If the intention is to address diet-related chronic disease, we would be better off investing in fruit and vegetable incentives like GusNIP and revive SNAP-Ed, a nutrition education program that was eliminated in H.R. 1. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin for 1 minute.
Gentleman
Thank
from
you.
Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
We could talk at length the degree to which our welfare system allows people to buy things or use services that the average person in our society, at least if they're appropriately frugal, do not use. But the easiest one that we should put it into is this idea of unhealthy sugary drinks. I mean, the lady talks about making life easier. If you want to make life tougher, you give people a lot of Mountain Dew and increase the amount of obesity and increase the amount of diabetes. That's not a good thing. And it's particularly not a good thing when you consider some of the money on this that you get in your food stamps goes to your kids. I mean, I feel horrible if I'm in a grocery store and I see somebody use food stamps for these soft drinks and they got little kids with them. I mean, we should just not do that. And like I said, I think the average person in our society does not spend money on this stuff, and we shouldn't be giving it to people in the welfare program. Thank you. I yield back to...
How much time do I have?
Someone has 2 minutes remaining.
Very good. I'd like to address the assertion that this is too complicated to implement. EBT systems already block thousands of ineligible items in real time. Retailers already categorize products at the UPC level. This is standard. WIC proves product level restrictions are fully operational nationwide. Technology has significantly advanced since earlier implementation concerns. The definition of soda is clear and administratable. Retail systems already distinguish between eligible and not eligible goods. This is not something the store has to do. And implementation is a logistics issue, not a policy issue, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from Minnesota.
I'll just end with this. I want you to imagine a single mom who is on the SNAP program, and remember, this is $6.20 a day, who wants to put a 4-pack, no one can afford 6-packs anymore because everything's too expensive, wants to put a 4-pack of soda as a treat once a week for her children. The idea that we are going to force that family, that single mom, to say, no, I can't choose to do that. We're going to take that choice away from them. Folks, there are lots of people who live in families that need just a little bit of help right now, and it's getting worse under this administration. You cannot deny it. And at the end of the day, this is one more way that we are attacking poor people in our country. Folks, we're all for healthy, but let's not be mean at the same time. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
I just want to ask one question. This amendment asks a basic question. Should a nutrition program pay for products with zero nutrition? If the answer is no, then the vote should be yes. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed.
Mr. Chair.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? Seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chair.
The Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 7567, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that committee has had under consideration H.R. 7567 and has come to no resolution thereon.